Okay, we are live streaming. I'm going to call the meeting to order. At this time, I would like to remind council, municipal staff, and members of the public in attendance that this electronic public meeting is being live streamed to the public. A video recording of this meeting will be available to the public on the township's YouTube account. Physical attendance of the public at this meeting is restricted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to thank the applicants for their patience and understanding of the need to organize this meeting through the use of technology. The municipality has made every effort to ensure all affected property owners were informed and are able to participate in this planning process. Now, just before we get started, I'd like to note that Councillor Wilmer will attempt to participate by cell phone. He may or may not be successful, so he asks that I read the following so everyone is aware. He said, I sincerely regret having to miss today's meeting, but must attend long delayed medical appointments at the Ottawa General Hospital that are crucial to my health. Unfortunately, these appointments have been rescheduled several times due to the pandemic and now conflict with today's meeting. And with that, Sue, could I get you to read the note, please? Oh, Sue, you are muted.
Here we go, first round. One of the purposes of the Planning Act is to provide for planning processes that are open, accessible, timely, and efficient. Accordingly, all written submissions, documents, correspondence, emails, or other communications, including your name and address, form part of the public record and will be disclosed, made available by the municipality to such persons as the municipality sees fit, including anyone requesting such information. Accordingly, in providing such information, you shall be deemed to have consented to its use and disclosure as part of the planning process.
Thank you. The purpose is to hear persons' comments in regards to zoning bylaw amendment application made by the applicant, owners applicants Craig Andrew Allen Kelly and Mary Jude Kelly, file number KEL-2021-03. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Lorbetsky.
Thank you, Mayor Love. Prior to proceeding, I would just like to note that there are 3 amendments to the agenda. So I would like to point those out. Item 6.13 is added, which is an email that I received from Gwen Dombrowski, who received one from Mr. David Henstock and was addressed to all of council, to Sue and to Gwen. So that was dated April the 19th, 2021. So that's being added as 6.13. And I'm also adding 6.14. That is an email dated April the 19th, 2021. It is a copy of a better site plan, as discussed, that the one in the package wasn't clear, so we just wanted to make that available. And that sketch came from the entrance application request form. So hopefully everybody can read the site plan with the measurements. And last but not least is item 11 at the very end. In trying to prepare this agenda, I was using an old template before the legislation got changed. So it is no longer 120 days, it is 90 days in section 34 bracket 11. And those are the 3 amendments to the agenda.
Silas, could I just point out that the one thing that was added, just so the public is aware, is number 2.3, which is the County of Renfrew Planning Division Zoning Bylaw Amendment Report to Council dated March 17th, 2021. That was, it was missed by error. It needed to be a part of the package. And I know that was the agenda was amended to include that, but for those members of the public who may have downloaded the agenda prior to that amendment occurring over the weekend, that that report is now included.
Thank you, Mayor Love, for clearing that up.
Okay, thank you. And if you would like to proceed, please.
Yes. So item 2.2 is the letter from the County of Renfrew dated March the 17th, 2021. And I am assuming that everyone had ample time to review all the documentation. I will not be going into detail reading the contents of each email. I will just be highlighting them. And I would just request that anybody who has any specific concerns with any of these items, that they be addressed when Mayor Love requests that towards the end of the meeting. So from that, I will move on then to the item 2.3, which is the County of Renfrew Planning Report, also dated March 17, 2021. I just want to double check that, pardon me, it is dated February the 12th, 2021, just for correction.
Silas, I'm sorry. The one I've got is dated March 17th.
Oh, I'm I've been looking at my draft copy and that was changed. You're correct. It is March 17th. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to be very clear that that is the planning report.
Absolutely. Very
okay.
And then we will move to item 3, which is the purpose and effect of the zoning bylaw amendment 3.1. This I will read out. The purpose and effect of the amendment is to rezone the property from community facility CF to residential 1, exception 71, holding R1-E 71-H. The exception zone would permit 3 single detached dwellings in the form of conversions of the 3 existing buildings on the subject land, comprising an assembly hall, church, and museum. The continuation of the existing uses on the property, assembly hall, church, and museum, shall also be permitted until the existing buildings are converted to residential buildings. The residential buildings may be permitted to be used for short-term rentals for a period of less than 28 days. The existing uses, building and site performance standards shall continue to apply. All other provisions of the zoning bylaw shall apply. The holding zone would permit 1 single detached dwelling, conversion of the assembly hall. The existing uses, buildings, and site performance standards will also be permitted. The holding zone would apply to the 2 additional dwellings, the conversion of which existing church and museum. The holding symbol would only be removed to permit these conversions when a hydrogeological evaluation has been completed to the satisfaction of the township. It will also include a nitrate impact assessment and confirmation of a suitable potable source of water for both quality in accordance with Ontario drinking water quality standards and quantity. Removal of the holding symbol, bracket H, symbol requires a subsequent bylaw to be passed by council under section 36 of the Planning Act. A notice of passing is not required to be given under section 36 bracket 4 of the Planning Act, and there is no appeal period, but a notice of intent to pass an amendment bylaw is required. The bylaw comes into effect upon its passing. We move on to item number 4, report on the application and notice. 4.1, notice of complete application was sent out and is dated March the 17th, 2021. Item 4.2, the notice of application and public meeting were sent out to all affected property owners within 20 meters, which converts to 400 feet of the subject application, and to all public bodies as required on March the 18th, 2021. Item 4.3, the notice was posted on the subject property on March the 18th, 2021. Item number 5, notice to public bodies, written responses, and/or telephone messages. 5.1, email from Ontario Power Generation, dated March the 18th, 2021. OPG has no comments or concerns. Item 5.2, email from David Tantalo, Renfrew County and District Health Unit, dated April 13th, 2021. Item 5.3, email from David Tantalo, Renfrew County and District Health Unit, addressed to myself and to Charles Cheeseman, dated April the 13th, 2021. Now, with respect to written comments, item 6.1, email received from David Henstock dated March the 19th and responses which was copied to council on March the 19th, 2021. Item 6.2, email from David Henstock, including response dated March the 22nd, 2021. Item 6.3, email from the applicants, including responses dated March the 22nd, 2021, requesting an invite to the Zoom meeting on April the 20th, 2021. Item 6.4, email from David Henstock to Gwen Dombrowski and response dated March the 26th, 2021. Item 6.5, email from Gwen Dombrowski to David Henstock dated March the 26th, 2021. Item 6.6, email from Charles Cheeseman to David Henstock dated March the 26th, 2021. Item 6.7, email from Ann Smith / Reverend Albert Romkima with attached submission and response dated April the 12th, 2021. So in these emails, I'm saying that there was an attachment. So those are things that, as I mentioned, can be discussed at, or any questions addressed at a later time in this meeting. Item 6.8, email from Shirley and Jack Rady with attached submission and response dated April the 13th, 2021. Item 6.9, email from Patricia Henstock with attached submission and response dated April the 14th, 2021. Item 6.10, email from David Henstock on behalf of Eddie Francis with attached submission dated April the 15th, 2021. Item 6.11, email from Craig Kelly requesting to make a statement or verbal presentation and response dated the April 15th, 2021. Item 6.12, email from David Henstock with attached submission and response dated April the 15th, 2021. Item 6.13 is the email that I mentioned earlier when we were amending the agenda from Mr. Henstock to council and staff members dated April the 19th, 2021. Item 6.14 is the email of yesterday afternoon, which is the clear site plan. And now we'll move on to item number 7, verbal report or general or telephone inquiries or attendances at the municipal office. Item 7.1, Councillor Poplinski attended the office on March the 19th, 2021, requesting additional information relating to the application. Item number 8, I will hand that over to you, Mayor Love.
Okay, thank you. Item 8 is oral or written presentations by those in attendance. Now, I normally ask the applicant if they'd wish to speak to their application before proceeding to members of the public in attendance. And should the applicant wish to speak at the beginning, then please note that you would get an opportunity to respond to anything you hear from the public. So Mr. and Mrs. Kelly, would you like to speak to the application to start us off?
Thank you, Mayor. That would be wonderful if we could do that. It's a slight couple pages, if that's okay, just to address the application.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, good morning, Madam Mayor, members of council, staff members, and members of the public. Jude and I are here today to answer any and all of your questions that you may have in regards to the rezoning application of our property on Mill Street in Combermere. Just by way of a brief background, in the summer and fall of 2020, we were exploring real estate options in the area. At the time, we were exploring options to invest in a long-term view for housing for my aging parents or for the future use by our children. We have a big family, big extensive family. We also enjoy older valley properties and renovation projects. Our path led us to the Mission Hall and St. Paul's Church property on Mill Street. We'd become enamored with other former churches and old schools that had been converted into residential buildings or that were being used as wedding chapels or other little venues. Prince Edward County and Merrickville have examples of some great conversions. And several years ago, we missed out on a chance to purchase the famed stone church in Wilno near Killaloe, for those that know it's near the golf course. These conversions had a cool factor, if you will, about them when we decided to explore purchase offer further and whether or not it was even an option to purchase. We had heard that the church has been deconsecrated and that the diocese was no longer looking to use it for their functions. Everything had been moved to Barriers Bay, the Church of the Epiphany on Dunn Street. We also hadn't been to a pancake supper or a hunter's dinner for a number of years, so figured the adjacent hall too was no longer in use by the community. Well, a few simple conversations and emails and an on-site visit of the facilities with the Anglican diocese officials, and we put in an offer that was later accepted by the diocese. Our offer included all the potential plans for the property, and it was our understanding that the diocese was excited for the redevelopment of a vacant building. We believe that they worked through their own process of disposal to facilitate the sale. So we really can't comment. We're not aware of that process, but that we are aware that they did work through their own process. However, we are dismayed that it has been suggested in some of the comments that we have received that I have a conflict of interest. By no means were any of these conversations ongoing while I was CAO of Madawaska Valley. To be clear, none of us, neither one of us, I should say, has had any influence over the sale or disposition of this property. At the time of our offer, the diocese told us that they had previously asked the township if it wished to purchase the property. We were also told that the township was asked again regarding any interest in purchasing the property while our offer was being considered. In both instances, it is our understanding that the township did not pursue an offer of purchase and sale, nor submit an offer of any kind. Our plans for the property were to convert at least one of the two buildings into a residential property. We weren't sure which one would be easier, quite honestly, or least expensive as a starting project. The current community facility zoning allows for one single detached dwelling, but the requirements are clear that it's to be secondary or subordinate, if you will, to the main use of the property. In this case, it was determined that the main use is actually the church building. We do not own the Mission House Museum. We should know right off the beginning. It is a township-owned building. However, the church has no facilities in it. There's no water, there's no sewage attached to it, etc. And we felt it would be easier at the time to convert the hall first so we could service the facilities to the church building. Should someone need to use the church and go to the washroom, then the building next door to it would have the actual facility. To answer questions regarding septic and water, etc., in the comments that we've received, we are more than aware of the regulations and have worked with the municipality to ensure compliance thus far. We have been given a building permit based on our submissions to the CBO, the chief building official. And while not a zoning issue, we have obviously made plans to upgrade the systems if deemed warranted. Basically, we're saying we understand that we bought the place in November. We had an ample chance to check the well out. We've had septic inspectors in. We've got letters of certification, if you will. And we are aware that if there are issues, we will address those at the time or prior to occupancy. The hall had 2 washrooms. It had a full kitchen and a fairly new heating system. It did require upgrades to insulation, wiring, and obviously aesthetics. It was built several years ago. The reason for the rezoning is that we wish to have the residential building or the hall stand on its own and not be tied to the church as a secondary use or subordinate. At the end of the day, we wanted to create a livable space for ourselves, our families, our guests, and future value. To that end, we have spent considerable effort, time, and money working with lawyers, planners, and the township, thank you very much to the township, to determine the best options for the rezoning. For those that have been through it, the rezoning process is a lengthy and costly endeavor. I live it every day. It requires a host of studies, reports, and a heck of a lot of energy. So we wouldn't have gone through this again in the future, or our children or future owners. We felt and were guided to do so to capture as much in this application as was possible in uses that we may do in the future. The neighborhood surrounding our property is very mixed use. I'm sure everybody is well aware of the area. Within earshot, there are commercial buildings, community parks, fire stations, senior centers, community rinks and halls, tourist establishments, farmers markets, museums, and of course, residential units. As a matter of fact, it's a well-planned neighborhood. Interestingly, years ago, this was the commercial area of Combermere. There were stores, there was gas stations, there were inns, and more. We were hoping to capture the historical nature of the buildings by preserving as much as we can by injecting some modern takes in design. Our proposed use does not conflict with these uses, in our opinion. The land offers an opportunity for parking for residential. The area around the property is regularly used for on-street parking. For instance, swimming lessons, visitors to the museum, and the farmers market regularly cause traffic and parking issues. We're not contributing to this cause. All our parking is planned to be on site. The zoning bylaw with respect to parking is only triggered with new use. It's been suggested in some of the comments that using the church, we should have to abide by the new the parking regulations as per the zoning bylaw. However, the church is not changing use at this time. We have not submitted a change of use for the church. So the parking requirement does not have to be adhered to nor updated until such time as we do change use. The addition of wording around short-term accommodations, it seems to have gotten the most comments that we've received. So the addition of the wording around short-term accommodations is, as far as we've been able to ascertain, the first of its kind in Renfrew County. We are not entirely sure if we will be hosting our residents as a quote unquote Airbnb or vacation rental, but we were advised by planning staff to include this caveat should we be considering this endeavor in the future at all. It should be noted there are dozens, if not hundreds, of short-term rentals in Madawaska Valley at the present time. To our knowledge, Madawaska Valley has not sought to regulate this type of housing. The official plan sections that have been referenced by the County of Renfrew are permissive policies for the township, or any township for that matter, to consider should they wish to do so in the future. Presently, in any zone, short-term rentals are thus allowed with or without permissive zoning. Jude and I and her family have hosted several seasonal rentals in the past, going back decades with our other vacation properties in our family. Should we go down that road, our intent would be to host a high-end and unique space for those looking to stay in the area to live, work, and enjoy the Madawaska Valley. We're not hosting party homes. We're not hosting something that has dozens and dozens of people showing up regularly. Some might stay for longer than 28 days, sure, but some might stay shorter than that. Some may want to use the church for a small wedding. We appreciate the comments with regards to a tourist commercial site that have been submitted, but we're not running this as a business, but making use of the current trends in the marketplace to assist us to recoup some of our costs should we deem that necessary. Again, this is a regular occurrence in the Valley, and we've not submitted it. Again, this is a regular occurrence in the Valley. We have not submitted an application that would incorporate our micro business, Algonquin Pod Company, as was also referenced. To correct one of the public comments, the address on our application is indeed our home address. On the other hand, when we are not using the property, we may decide to let our friends and family use it. We've created a very chic house that is very accessible for those looking to relocate into town. We've already been approached by, for example, working one day, a couple approached us. They thought what we were doing is fantastic and actually approached us about leasing it or renting it starting this summer. So surprisingly, word has gotten out that we may be looking to rent this as a residential place for those looking to locate where there are streetlights, paved roads, and access to beautiful waterways. As you've already seen in your package, we had hoped for a second entrance to the property and are working with Hillary and the township to determine if that's possible. We're still not sure. We still have our own work to do, and we'll work with Hillary on that should we move forward. Again, notably, currently the only entrance is attached to the use of the township-owned museum, and it is now in very close proximity to the neighbor's new driveway. In the absence of being allowed a new driveway, we will work with the current one as best possible, of course. We're working with our landscape designer on our plans for the summer, and will include appropriate parking pads and access point in the ample backyard. We've been made aware that the township has been discussing the lease of the township-owned property known as the Mission House Museum. However, we've not been part of those council meetings that have occurred to date. We're a little disheartened that we've not been included in these conversations, but welcome the conversation moving forward with the township to determine what those lease requirements will be and how they can be renegotiated at the end of this term in June 2nd, 2022, I believe. But again, it's really nothing to do with the rezoning. That's a separate issue, and we'll determine that at a later time at another meeting. I'll note, though, from the start, we both acknowledged we have a desire to work with the township and the volunteers of the Cumbermere Heritage Society to continue the relationship that is enjoyed through the lease of the land to the township and the museum. Again, for the public, we are now owners of the land on, around, and under the township-owned museum. But we have notified the township in writing that we've terminated, we wish to provide notice to terminate the lease at the end of the term because it needs to be renegotiated. The wording is wrong. I mean, there's references to people that don't exist anymore, and we just need to update terms to include ourselves and other ones. However, again, these aren't zoning issues nor pertinent to today's meeting, but are willing to negotiate these, but are not willing to negotiate these in the public forum. Suffice it to say, the new proposed zoning recognizes the ability for the current uses of the property and the other two buildings to be used as they currently are, the museum and the church, until we determine that we'd like to convert the church to a residential use. And we agree with the nitrate studies and all those other items that we have to address at that time. We've already invested considerable time and money into this project to make it a much better than a series of buildings that were undoubtedly going to fall into disrepair. And we plan on doing more in the years to come. But like everybody, this will be budget dependent. The zoning bylaw allows, this zoning bylaw amendment allows the flexibility for us to take our time and yet still have to go through a series of studies and justifications, again, that we agree to, with the approval of this or a future council. We sincerely hope that you see this development project as a positive step in the rejuvenation of vacant buildings in Combermere and certainly beneficial to the community. Our rezoning application allows us to move forward with our plans and plan accordingly for this construction season. Again, thank you for your consideration, council and members of the public.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Would you please provide a copy of that to Gwen Dombrowski for our records? We'd appreciate that.
Most certainly can, and we would have done so earlier, but of course there's finishing touches up until this morning. Thank you very much.
Totally understand. I just want to make sure we do get a copy of what you've presented to us. It was fairly comprehensive. Okay, with that, then I'm going to proceed on the agenda, and we have Mr. David Henstock, who wishes to address council on this matter. David, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, my love. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate that the applicant has taken the effort to provide additional information, and that in certain ways does modify what I had prepared. But I just would like to start and say that I guess fundamentally, and this is not particularly aimed at the applicants, I'm fundamentally questioning the use of an exception where a 1 acre lot can be allowed to be developed for 3 residential homes. And so I just put that out there. And in this particular application, I'm a little bit puzzled by the holding code. But I do actually recognise that you know, this is a process, an application that is complex, and therefore it's not easily accessible to constituents. And I guess, you know, I want to assure the applicants, I've made more than a little effort to try to understand, you know, what is proposed here. And I think before I just go into the presentation proper, I think the timeline of the current work, which is undergoing at the hall, and indeed the planned work, makes it rather difficult. And I'll probably come back to that later, but I did arrange with Gwen that I would just present a short presentation, and I have that, because of technology gremlins, I have that recorded. So with your permission, Melov, I'd just like to run that. It is just over 10 minutes, and then that will be the end of my presentation. I have 2 additional images that I'd like to bring into it, but it's not relevant in the presentation stage. It may come up in terms of questions, if that's okay. So.
Okay, so I would just suggest, because we have everybody homeschooling, if your internet is a little bit iffy when we run this video, we suggest you turn off your camera. And Gwen, if you could, I don't know how you're going to cue this up, but
Right.
We'll turn off our cameras because, yeah, this will be a challenge.
I would just say, guys, that there is no backstop. I have this on a shareable link on YouTube, but we'll just see whether this actually works or not. It may not. In which case, I will address it another way. Reference
to the private meeting requested, November 6th, 8:48 a.m. I wrote.
Mr. Henstock, I was able to hear something for a moment, but we've lost the video share and it seems to have stopped. Would you like to try to share again?
I'm not sure whether we should spend time on this.
Standing at the neighbour's boundary, looking to the church.
I can see the share, but you can't.
Parking just behind the church in the corner.
Unfortunately, we can't see the video. We can hear it. Okay, let's give it another go.
Can you see it now?
I can see that you're sharing your screen, but I can't actually see the video. You would have to restart it. Okay, I've got the image of your screen before you start it. At this point, I do have an image. Oh.
Access to the rear of the property. Can she see it?
Unfortunately, it is kicked out again.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate the fact that you've you've persevered. So let's just go back to me addressing on camera. And,
okay.
It's unfortunate, but I mean, we did a test with Gwen, and unfortunately, the technology is not going to permit. But I'm happy to respond to the applicants, and I can do that on camera if that's your wish, Mela.
Well, we certainly do want to, give you an opportunity to speak to the application. So if you would prefer to just do it in person, then I really honestly don't think with the internet challenges we have in rural Ontario that this is going to fly. I mean, nice idea, well, but we are challenged.
My backup was to provide a shareable link on YouTube, and I'm not proposing that we should all head off and try and look at that now. So let me just speak, and I'll observe the fact that I'm already well into 15 minutes, so I'll try and keep it brief. What I'd like to do in actual fact is just respond and thank again the applicants for their additional information, because I think that's at the heart of this, that when the sale was announced, I did indeed reach out to Craig and Jude and actually suggest that there would be a meeting to allow the residents to understand the intent. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. It was something that wasn't on their priority list at the beginning, and I said, that's fine, let's do it when you can. It hasn't happened to date. And I think the unfortunate thing is that, the rumour mill in Combermere is strong. We had a case where there was a coffee house going to be set up in the church, and so forth. So, we did speak to that challenge.
Mr. Henstock, could I just get you to pause for a moment? I apologize. I'm looking to see if I have Councillor Schulist, and I seem to have lost a member of council. Gwen, I don't want the members of council to miss what you're saying. So if it's going to, I apologize. I may have to ask you to start again once we get Councillor Schulist back. But I think the process of going to the video, we've lost him. Gwen, could you check in with Councillor Schulist? And if I could, okay, I've got Councillor Bromwich. Councillor Poplinski, are you able to turn your video on?
I don't know. Okay, just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I do have audio.
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
But I definitely have lost one member of council through that transition. So I do want to make sure that if they can join us again, that, as many members as possible can hear your presentation. So I do apologize for pausing you, but I think this is important. And I'll let Gwen try to connect, or we'll give Councillor Schulist an opportunity to connect back to the meeting. And I'm sorry to the applicants. Here we are. Welcome to rural broadband.
We're all used to it.
Absolutely. I don't think I lost anybody else, but I did lose Councillor Schulist. This may take a few minutes because it's very difficult to get someone back into a meeting if they've been bumped out.
Councillor Schulist is trying to log in.
Okay.
He said give him 3 to 5 minutes. So I don't know if you want to proceed or if you want to hold until he's able to join again.
I think I'd honestly like to hold until he's able to join again because he will be part of the decision process today. So therefore, I would like him to hear the presentation and any other comments that are made by members of the public on the application. I guess everyone just bear with us, and we'll get our last member of council back into this meeting. It's like the 7th inning stretch.
Only it's the first inning.
Yes, absolutely. But you know, I think we all try to accommodate through COVID with the technology, but we certainly are challenged by the width of our broadband is very narrow. Mr. Larbetsky, is it possible for us to take a 5-minute break? I don't know. I've never done that in a planning meeting.
I can't see why not. Just call a break because of technicalities. So
Okay.
it's duly noted, and Gwen just records that.
Okay, so I think if we just take 5 minutes to stretch, breathe, and let Councillor Schulist to get back on, we'll call the meeting. I'll call it back to order at 10:15, and we'll Mr. Henstock will give you a chance to restart your comments to the proposal. Okay. Gwen, do we have any sign of Councillor Schulis being able to reconnect to the meeting or attempting? Gwen is probably juggling about 3 different things right now, so.
Dave is not in the waiting room yet.
Okay. Mr. Larbetsky, is it all right for us to proceed without Councillor Schulis and then have him miss some part of this material? I'm just concerned. I don't want a member of council in a position where they don't have all of the input.
Mayor Law,
Yes.
I would prefer waiting because we already have one council member that isn't attending. I would like all of council to hear the complete presentation so that an informed decision can be made. Thank
Okay.
you.
Gwen, I know you're hugely busy. Is there any chance you could call Councillor Schulis and see if he is attempting to log back onto the meeting?
Yes, Kim, he was. He had one computer that went down, so they're starting up another one. Oh, he's here now.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll just give him a chance to get in. And again, I apologize to all, but it's the joys of municipal business in a pandemic.
Mayor Love, I think the apology is entirely due to my approach to, so my apology is to the rest of the group. I did acknowledge Gwen's help because we did do a test on this, and
Yes.
we were of opinion it was going to work, but sadly not.
Okay. Well, nice try. I do see Councillor Schulis. I just don't see he needs to turn his video on.
I'm back.
Okay, there we are.
And
I
have my tech support with me. Yeah. Anyway, Madam Mayor, I have to apologize for a computer. My old computer, I guess, is it's 3 years old. Like, that's really old, right? So, but anyway, I'm back on the laptop. Sorry for the inconvenience. Continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Schulis. I'm going to ask Mr. Henstock to begin. He was going to do the presentation himself without the video, so I'm going to ask him to begin again. We did wait so that you could hear his input, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Mr. Henstock, please take it away again.
Thank you, Mayor Love. Well, apologies again to everyone. I didn't anticipate causing this delay. In fact, the reason I did the short video was to simply stay on track. It was about 10 minutes. I thought it would be a good way. Let me just reiterate, I'm opposed in principle to the use of zoning exception for a 1 acre lot. It's not directed at the applicant. It's simply my personal view, which I can express. With regard to the holding code in this application, subject to the required tests, I actually think that those tests should actually be tied into the current permit, but that's again a personal view. I would acknowledge that the application here is complex and it's not easily accessible by general constituents. I've made a considerable effort actually to read the material and to understand what the applicants are proposing. And I think one of the things I did mention on the video is that the timeline of the current and the planned work makes it harder to fathom what's actually proposed. And so, as I say, I haven't rushed to judgment. I've taken time to try and understand it. The idea of the presentation was that I actually wanted to present material that was in fact a site visit so that people not familiar could see it, and it gave a context to my words, but obviously I'm missing that. I do thank again the applicants for their update at the beginning of this public meeting. I think that is actually pertinent to today's discussion. But I will just whip through the main points of the presentation that I'm now not able to make. The first one was that I was actually in contact with the diocese from 2017-18, in fact, and particularly through 2020. And the purpose behind that was to ensure that they understood the views of the residents. And it was their desire that the outcome for the sale of the property would be in the best interest of the community. And we shall see. With regard to the applicants, I did reach out to them when they gave me the news of their purchase. I reached out through email and said, you know what, you should really try and get a meeting together with the residents to answer any questions, concerns. They didn't have time immediately, and I said, that's fine, let's do it at some time when you can. And I just have to update you and say that has never happened in the intervening time. My sort of site visit would have taken you from 1026, which is my neighbouring property on the south side, just simply showing the proximity of the church to their property. And then it switched to my property, which is 1058 on the north side. And again, just switching around and showing people the context. The grounds currently have been maintained through my initiative to get a contractor and paid for by the diocese. So I'm gratified to hear that the applicants are actually using the time to get a landscape project organised. Fencing is required, and I reached out for an answer both to the diocese, in fact, and to the applicants, whether there was any intent to support my efforts in terms of funding. I don't have an answer on that. I also understand that the applicants made inquiries about the vacant lots along Mission Road. I'm not sure what that was about, but obviously I can tell everybody that I acquired the 2 lots which abut the property, the subject lands. I acquired those in 2007. I showed a view of the west of Mill Street. One of the things in the application is it doesn't really relate to the fact that immediately facing the church in particular are 2 residences. And I think that's pertinent to the discussion. The provision of parking, the applicants have provided additional information on that, and I'm entirely prepared to be corrected. As I say, this is a complicated thing, and I'm no expert when it comes to the Planning Act or indeed municipal affairs. I do have a view on parking, and I can get into that if called on. Similarly, the encroachments, that I note there is a recommendation for a bylaw to adopt those encroachments. I'd like to speak to that when we get into open discussion. There was a reference in the applicant's submission for the precedent case, which thanks to the county planner, Mr. Cheeseman, I was able to look into. And I would just contend that that as a site does not in fact support the application. It's 1.4 acre. It has 3 properties on the site, and the properties are indeed rented, but they're rented long term, and one gentleman has been there for 30 years. So I don't feel that's actually a particularly good case. Short-term rental was indeed mentioned, and I guess that has, as the applicants have mentioned, that has taken a focus that may be unwarranted given the applicant's update. I think simply put, had he come to the people and said, hey, you know, my folks are going to be moving in here, then this whole thing would have taken on a different context. When it comes to the technical stuff, I did work with the church group. I'm aware of the installation. I'm happy to hear that testing has been going ahead. I am concerned that the well is in proximity to the weeping tile of the septic system. And I know that the well is actually a drive point because I'm familiar with those things in my own use. And I simply said in my presentation that were I to develop something where the intent was for public consumption of water, then I would be looking at something different to a drive point, because even when new, they don't support the flow rate that you might want, particularly as the suggestion is that that may form the water source for the expansion of the property. I don't agree with that. So I think that the presence of the shallow well at the end of the septic weeping tile is problematic, and I know that it's the job of the septic inspector to comment on that, but I'm also willing to comment on it freely. There are generally issues with renovations of old buildings, and I think that the applicants would fully accept that. This isn't sort of, you know, homes on homes makeover, TV reality. This is serious stuff, and you know, in a sense, I offer them my condolences for trying to do this, because I know that I certainly wouldn't undertake the renovation of a building that was built in 1850 or so. Pat and I moved to this place in we bought a house that was built in 1985, and I can tell you that built under permit and controlled, we have found some particularly unwelcome events to deal with. Regarding the update that the applicants have provided this morning, I don't think anybody was actually suggesting a conflict of interest with regard to the applicant's role with the Madawaska Valley Township. I think it should be acknowledged that his position with the County of Renfrew certainly as a minimum provides a position of advantage, if nothing more. Certainly it's demonstrated in the nature and detail of the application, which is highly technical and is vague in respect of the specifics as to what the intended use and the intended land use. So, as I say, had that been covered off in a requested private meeting with residents, I think we would all be in a much better place right now. The second entrance is problematic. It isn't something that I would welcome to see, and I would link the whole topic of the encroachments, the access to the site together, and suggest that there's a far better option, which is to actually provide an entrance between the former mission hall and the church, and then parking immediately behind those two buildings. But there's a site plan that Mr. Levetsky put out, and if you look at that, I think it makes sense to consider that. Mayor Love, I think that's very roughly covered everything that I wanted to touch on. And if there are any questions for me directly, then obviously I'm happy to take those now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Henstock. At this point, Mr. and Mrs. Kelly, would you care to respond to Mr. Henstock before I open it up to any comments from other members of the public, or would you prefer to hear those comments and then respond?
They may be similar in nature. I think we could wait. We're taking notes, so we can. I'll wait perhaps for other public input, and we'll respond to it all as in the whole.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I just did want to give you that opportunity to respond directly before we lost track of some of those points. Is there any other members of the public in attendance who would like to speak to the application? Okay, if for those who have never been to one of these, if you would like to speak, just put your hand up and I can see you and acknowledge you. Okay, I'm assuming that's Reverend Ram Kima and Ann Smith.
Right. We just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to be here, and it did make a big difference for us to meet Craig the other day, which I think, as David has pointed out, I think it's pretty important that we keep the communication between us. I think it's so important, and I think it did make a difference seeing you in person the other day and hearing your presentation today as well. So thank you for that, Craig. And also to David for the great neighbor that he is, and he's always so interested in this community. I guess our thoughts are strictly that for us, it's first a residential neighborhood, and that's where we start. It's not at the bottom of the list, and so we're just wanting to make sure that that's what's being discussed. But we're just here to observe and see how this process works. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I don't think there are any other members of the public here. So I will turn it back over to Mr. and Mrs. Kelly to see if they'd like to respond to with the comments they've heard.
Thank you, Mayor, and definitely members of the public and council. So I think let us address the gathering, if you will, of the community. And I acknowledge Mr. Henstock reached out as I believe I sent a note to many of the folks that we had email addresses. We know a few of the neighbors, of course. And we sent a note out saying we are purchasers, and we acknowledge, and we included council, I think, at that time. We've tried to be open and transparent from the beginning, at the beginning at least anyways. I'll use, I guess, the often used excuse. With COVID in existence, we were reticent to host any type of gathering inside or outside. And it's not an excuse that's that I use most of the time, but I'll use that as a preface some of those comments that the gathering was kind of weird for us to host, and we are both public people in the community, and I think that having a public meeting with a gathering was just not something that we were comfortable with, that we're outside of our family bubble, if you will. The other part of the public process was to let it play out, and I got to be honest, we have gone through a series of lawyers and worked with the township legal on this. Typically, you go through a general inquiry process with the County of Renfrew. For those that don't know, there's a general inquiry process. You can determine what and if is able to be done on a property. We've been on an island to deal with that a bit by itself. We have not involved county staff whatsoever. This has been my work, our work, and with a senior planning official that we've used that is retired now. So that is our work. So we've tried to eliminate any of that perception of conflict with my job at the County of Renfrew. So I'll acknowledge that right off the top. We are, again, aware of the parking issues. We have talked to our good neighbors, the Reverend and Ms. Smith, and acknowledged, that driveway. Listen, that's not the best place for a driveway. We're working on that as well. Neither is the one between the Mission House and the hall. There's an old cross buried into the grass. For those that don't know, we just found it, actually. I think it was Mr. Guest put it in the church years and years ago. So we've actually uncovered it. There's some neat things. There's also some problems because the Mission House septic is directly beside their property. So we're trying to find a solution for another parking or driveway if it's even warranted. So we're just working with that. So we'll work with that. On the fencing issue, we don't have deep pockets, but we are looking at buffering. It may include hedging or otherwise as we move forward. We know that, and we've heard this from Mr. Henstock, there are ample deer in the area, and I guess cedar hedges might become cedar twigs before we even pay the bill. So we're looking at different ways. Of course, we've spent a lot of money on survey work and are quite aware of where the survey lines are now, and may consider fencing or buffering in the future. You want to look at us, we don't want to look at you, I guess, as good neighbors, but we'll figure this out, I think, as partners moving forward. The well and the septic, yeah, I mean, again, the well is a well. It's serviced, it may not service anything else. It's not something we want to spend more money on and drilling something right now. I think the plumbers are going to be in there in the next day or two, hooking everything up and getting it running for us. But we acknowledge that if we have to put a well in, then maybe that is an expense we'll have to do now or in the future. The other way it's got to be probably done. The holding tank from the drive point is about 75 feet from the actual well as it is now. Installed properly, I guess at the time. The weeping bed is probably 100 plus feet. So depending on drilled or dug well, these meet the standards of legislation as it is now. So we're comfortable with that. And one thing we definitely check. We have Yantha Septic, Yantha's who do several septics throughout the area, quite aware, and they've done that inspection. Again, we have been in conversation that we may have to do some work on, we know it's a 4,500 liter tank. We have to do some work now that the ground is thawed on the septic tile bed to determine the bulkhead and the size of that actual bed. We reached out day one to the township and asked, do they have a record of the septic installation that was done probably 15, 20 years ago? And there's no record on site. A lot of Radcliffe files have disappeared, unfortunately, and that's unfortunate because now we've got to dig up ground that we shouldn't otherwise have to do. So again, we're aware of these issues. I think they are captured quite well, that Mr. Cheeseman and Ms. Bennett have incorporated into the zoning bylaw that should expansion take place, the appropriate studies, a nitrate study should have to happen, but at least it allows this one project to continue and move forward. Yeah, the encroachment issues, I'll quickly suggest there's a few known encroachments that should the township ask us for an encroachment bylaw, of course, we'd work through that. One is a staircase, a very long, elongated steps into what we determine as Mission Hall, the middle building. And they are, steps are allowed to encroach under most bylaws in every city or town. It's a walkway, and that's one of them. There is a heritage plaque and some old historic signage on the property that the township has installed. We're anxious to continue with those plaques and continue that. They are referenced on our survey. And most importantly, and actually more fun for us, is the historic old cement staircase that leads into the church. We've tried to do some de-hedging and hopefully power wash and actually bring back. That is a 150-year-old staircase that I think deserves keeping for the heritage of the area, and recognizing that these are important, significant buildings to the village of Combermere. And we're trying to beautify it as best we can and bring it back to the life that hopefully it enjoyed centuries, if not decades ago. So I think that addresses some of the items, and I'm happy to answer more questions from Mayor or Council this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Henstock, I did notice that you had put your hand up. Did you have a question for the applicants?
Well, it was just a comment. The request for a private meeting, obviously we're all aware of COVID, and the technology that I suggested was actually a telephone conference call, not wanting to get into Zoom meetings for the reasons that we've had this morning. So it would have been entirely possible to organize a conference call via telephone, and so, you know, no excuse.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other comments from members of the public? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to go to number 9 on the agenda, which is questions discussion by council. Members of council, let me make sure I can find you. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I've got you. Does anyone have any questions on this application? I'm not. Oh, okay. Councillor Poplinski, and you'll need to unmute yourself.
How's that?
That's fine.
Love, is that coming in clear? Good.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I do have a couple of comments, and I'm wondering, Councillor Wilmer has expressed his regrets, and Mayor Love, you've mentioned that, and I'm just wondering, he did submit a some of his concerns, and I'm just wondering, I do concur with much of what he has stated here, and I'm just wondering if I could state this for the record, with your permission.
Yes.
Okay, I'll just continue here. This is Councillor Wilmer's contribution and his regrets he can't be here today. Since I'm unable to attend the meeting, I have listed a few of my thoughts and questions. The proposal appears to upset the entire street. Is that good planning? Is there too much development for the size of the property? Does the proposed fit in with the ambience of the rest of the street? Any short-term rentals on this property, an appropriate use? Good planning usually involves consultation with the surrounding property owners and neighbors. This proposal seems to have been developed in relative secrecy with no consultation. County planning reports usually include a recommendation. Why is there none with this report? However, I realize there are some options which the county has, so I will comment on that further later. The county planning reports usually, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead there. Why was material being added from the county to the agenda over the weekend? This is not normal. Who supplied it and authorized it? As I said, just a few of my thoughts. I sincerely wish I could be there today. hoping that all goes well. And I think that in light of the complexities that have been already expressed here, the new information which has come about, there's been some suggestion that we should have a site meeting. And I honestly do think that if we take the necessary precautions dealing with the COVID situation, that could be a possibility. And I really think it's important. I would have welcomed the opportunity to be able to have a conversation with someone prior to the actual sale of the property. And Mr. Kelly is, he informed us that he had been working with Township. However, it never came to the council level. So, that would have been an opportunity. There was an ad hoc committee appointed, and I was asked if I would chair that committee. I was never given that opportunity. I had spoken with many people on the street, and I knew very well some of the concerns that were expressed. Having had a piece of property that it's not just a straight sale. We had a lease on that property, and I think it would have been wise to have that discussion early on. It would have solved some of the misunderstandings that we're now dealing with today. So that's my suggestion, that we do not proceed with this application today, but follow the county's advice as one of their options, and that's to postpone it until further site visit could happen, and perhaps have a look at some of the additional information which was just given to us. I did receive a map, but I haven't been able to, working remotely like this and not having the capability of being able to really take advantage of that map. It would be something that I would like to see, and I'm fairly familiar with the property. I'm a Combermere person and lived here a good part of my life and familiar with it. However, I think it's wise for everybody to have a look at within what we're proceeding here. And I'm all for development, and I encourage and thank the Kellys for trying to do something in the community. That's we all, I think, have that same position, but I just don't think that we can proceed with it today.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Poplinski. In relation to some of your comments, I'd just like to confirm with the Kellys that you actually approached the diocese. You were not engaged with the municipality through the process of the sale. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, we
Yes.
weren't not sure when we were made aware that there's actually a working group, whether the diocese told us that or not. No, we hadn't. This was a private sale between us and the diocese. The township had no involvement until the day the offer was accepted and done from there. Yeah, go ahead, Jude, just so I can make note.
However, the diocese did share with us at the time that they were going to take it back to the township and consult with the township about previous arrangement and if the township was still interested. But what they did on their end, we are unaware of, but that was what was shared with us.
Okay, Sue, could you please confirm that the diocese did not do that?
That is correct. After being forwarded the email that council received about the purchase of the sale, I then communicated with Bishop Michael Bird that I had been advised of the sale of the purchase.
And there was no communication in regards to from the diocese to the municipality prior to the sale to the Kellys? After you had spoken with them, they did not communicate with us.
No, they did not.
Okay.
From the last communication that was forwarded to council, and then we received notification that the sale had occurred.
So there was no communication with the municipality from the last communication that all of council received, and that was a while before the sale took place. And then the Kellys did communicate with council and let us know that they had purchased the property. So I want to dispel that notion. It did not happen. So I want to put that to bed. Councillor Poplinski.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Love. I'm just wondering if I could comment further. Mr. Kelly and Mrs. Kelly, in your message, in your email message to the council on the 4th of November of this past year, you informed us that you had purchased that property. And in your email, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it suggests the fact that you were working with the township. And I would really like to know if you could tell me who you're working with, because it wasn't council. And I don't believe it was the guy working the dump or the guy on the grader. It was somebody in management. And I would like very much if you could share that with us.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Popinski and others, I think with the letter, I'd have to go through my emails, Councillor Popinski, to see, I would imagine either Silas or Sue or otherwise, the working with the township would have been in reference to working with them on the lease, because that is the current relationship and really the only relationship we have with the municipality is the continuance or expiration of that lease moving forward in 2022. Well, and building permits and other plans and stuff like that, but that would have been with the chief building official and otherwise.
Okay, Mr. Kelly, that would all be in relation to after the sale had occurred.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, again,
Okay, I want to clarify that.
I'm not going to comment on the diocese, whether they did or didn't, because that would be third party and we don't have that knowledge.
Absolutely wouldn't ask you to. That's why I went back to municipal staff. Councillor Poplinski.
Yes, going back to the email, which you of course informed us of the sale, I would appreciate if you would review it, and perhaps you may want to comment further on that particular information. I would have welcomed the opportunity to be able to sit down and talk about the lease. And you suggested you talked to somebody about the lease. Well, I'd like to know who it was. I mean, I'm at in a bit of a quandary there. So perhaps you may want to refresh your memory on that and get back to us.
I can address that right away, Madam Mayor. We have spoken to the only two people. There's been three people we've spoken to over the whole course of the last 6 months. That'd be Ms. Klatt, Mr. Lorbetsky, and Mr. Dombrowski. That were the only three people, of course, that we've talked about this through the whole time. We've had one meeting, one or two phone calls with Mr. Lorbetsky and Ms. Klatt, and of course several emails and back and forth with Mr. Dombrowski on the building side and compliance issues throughout the whole process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Yeah. Could you please confirm that all of that correspondence occurred after the sale of the property?
Oh, yes, yes, it did. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Councillor Poplinski.
If I may, thank you. So you're saying there was no conversation with any of the people that you just mentioned prior to November the 3rd or 4th?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So on the matter of the sale of the property, it's really not an issue for this planning meeting, but I did want to clarify that point because it has come up previously at council meetings. Mr. Lorbetsky, I noticed your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Love. Just a point of clarification, and for the record, the email or communication that Councillor Poplinski read from Councillor Wilmer, I have not been made aware of that. I would definitely like a copy for the record for this meeting, that be provided so that it is duly recorded. And just to address one of the comments that was made in that presentation, comments are provided to the municipality right up to and during the meeting. So we have to accept whatever comes in, and because of the not difficulty, but the complexity of this particular rezoning, Gwen made every effort to provide council with the documentation that was required for this public meeting. So therefore, there was nothing being withheld. It was all being provided as quickly as it became available. So just for the record, thank you.
Mr. Lorbetsky, we will certainly ensure that email came in very early this morning, so we will make sure that you receive a copy of that. And it literally was addressed to council and the CAO. So we will make sure you have a copy of that so everyone is aware, but Councillor Poplinski did read exactly what the email did state. So, okay. Sue.
I did find, I don't have a November 4th email, but I was forwarded this email on November 5th. If you wish, I could read it. I believe this is the email that Councillor Poplinski is referencing. It was from Mr. Craig Kelly, sent to all of council. I was not copied. I was forwarded it the next day by you, Mayor Love. And it reads, "Good evening, members of council. We wanted to reach out and let you know that we are the purchasers and new owners of the St. Paul's Parish property and buildings. While we don't take possession for a couple of weeks by November 20th, and this was dated November 5th, we have finalized the purchase with the diocese. Our plans are still being worked out, and we will have to navigate these with the township moving forward. Obviously, we won't be running a church, so we will have to examine how we approach the current zoning. We are committed to continuing with the Mission House and the great folks who are running it. As you know, we have a personal connection and will honor that relationship. We are tremendously excited and are busy drawing up our plans for new layouts and the required renovations of the buildings. They are marvelous old buildings, and we will be celebrating that fact. I'm sure you'll see us poking around, taking measurements, and working with some of our future subcontractors so we can get some of the needed work completed this fall. Feel free to say hi or call us anytime for a chat. We sincerely hope that you will welcome our investment in the Mill Street neighborhood. All the best, Craig and Jude Kelly.
Okay, thank you, Sue. If you could please provide that as well to Mr. Larbetsky, because it also should be then therefore on the record for this meeting because it's been read into the record.
I will forward that. Thank you.
At this point, Mr. Henstock, I'm not taking questions from the public. I am at the point in the agenda where I am doing questions and discussion by council. So I'm just letting you know I cannot respond to your putting your hand up. Now, I did notice Councillor Bromwich wanted to speak much earlier. I apologize. We will move to you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to council and members of the public. The first thing I'd like to say, I'll try and be brief here. When I heard the Kellys had purchased this property, it was a large weight off our shoulders. It was actually fantastic news, very positive, because we have local people, local citizens that have lived in Commermere would appreciate the jewel, the asset to the township that they've purchased. They would treat this with kid gloves. And this morning's presentation by the Kellys shows that they are very concerned about future development here, and they are concerned with the neighbors and the public input that's been coming to them. I think there's some fine tuning to be done on this agreement, but I would not try and delay this any longer. And there's a huge amount of work that the Kellys are going to have to go through to get this off the ground, and I wouldn't want to delay the decision much longer. A lot of work and money's gone into this, and I think to delay this agreement at this point in time would be detrimental to both the development and the future of this township asset. So I would try and go ahead with this, and I know there's going to be fine tuning involved to agree to make everybody happy. I can't be more pleasantly surprised that these people picked this up, and they'll be treated with kid gloves. The heritage of Commermere will be treated with respect, and I just want to thank them for what they've done so far and wish them good luck in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bromwich. I think what I would like to do, I know I have a series of questions I would like to ask and get clarification on, because obviously this is a somewhat unusual situation we find ourselves in, with having the buildings already exist, but what we're looking at is a change of use, and that's what the zoning would reflect, this zoning bylaw amendment. So I think, bear with me, I'm going to sort of start from the beginning of some questions I have, and I think I may actually call on Mr. Cheeseman to clarify, because I absolutely respect that, Mr. Kelly, your experience is in planning, and so I would expect no less than that your application would have considered planning matters and have show a depth of knowledge that perhaps the average lay person doesn't have. I'm approaching this from the perspective of just my experience on council, but I do want to ask some planning-based questions, because this is a planning meeting. So Mr. Cheeseman, if you wouldn't mind joining us, I'm going to just seek clarification from you on a couple of points. The first one, and the one that gives me the most pause, that I'm struggling with, is that the nature of the application, and then the the planning report from the county don't necessarily conform with the letter that came from the county or the bylaw that's being proposed. So to take us back to the application on page 8 of council's package, you'll note that the applicants have asked to allow 1 detached dwelling and up to 2 detached secondary dwelling units. That's also reflected in the report from the County of Renfrew. The planning report, it mentions to allow for 1 detached dwelling and up to 2 secondary dwelling units. However, when I look at the planning letter that accompanied the report, it says the exception zone would permit 3 single detached dwellings. I would suggest to council that while it seems similar, these are very different matters to consider. So I'm just wondering, Mr. Cheeseman, if you could please just clarify for us why what was applied for isn't reflected in the zoning bylaw amendment that we would have in front of us.
Thank you, Mayor Love and members of council and members of the public. Good morning. So in a general sense, when we get an application for rezoning, sometimes the way it's styled by the applicant doesn't work as far as the converting it to a zoning bylaw amendment. So we sometimes can make a change from the application to the actual bylaw if we think it just makes better sense, it's better presented, that the terminology is more suitable to the zoning bylaw amendment than what the person applied for. That's not to say that in other cases where if people apply to reduce a side yard setback from 3 meters to 2 meters, that's what we put in the bylaw. This file was a little different. In the report, on page 1 of the report and page 29 of your package, item 7 of the report says details of zoning bylaw request, and we put the submitted application. So that's what the application came in as submitted. And maybe I didn't put a trail between that and my final bylaw that said 3 dwellings. And for that, I apologize. But my opinion as the planner was, at the end of the day, a dwelling unit with 2 secondary dwelling units is 1 + 2 = 3. And I just felt that was a much easier way to understand the project. And the bylaw also says that, as drafted, that this comprises the potential conversion of the 3 existing buildings to 3 dwellings. And to me, it just made sense to call a spade and say it's 3 dwellings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I did want that clarified because a number of people did notice the discrepancy between what was applied for and what was presented in terms of the actual, the actual zoning bylaw amendment. So I know that this sounds to the average person like the same thing. The outcome is the same thing, but I feel there's nuances here, certainly. The applicants do identify a precedent in the Bloom-Koulis zoning bylaw amendment that was done in 2011, which is for a property on the Cumbermere Road that had three residential dwellings on it. Now, I'm not sure why the actual zoning bylaw amendment was done at the time, but it does recognize 3 single detached dwellings being permitted. Those single detached dwellings, Mr. Lerbetsky, where is he? I've lost him. Okay, if Mr. Lerbetsky, could you please confirm that those dwellings existed on the property prior to planning coming into effect in Radcliffe in 2006?
Thank you, Mayor Love. To my recollection, all of those buildings were there. So it was a similar situation that buildings were there and the rezoning was conducted, because prior to that, that was a service station known as Freddy's Texaco, I believe. So that was one of the reasons why I think it was rezoned. But my memory doesn't serve me as well. I'm not sure the content of that application, and I didn't pull that file to bring it into this meeting. Thank you.
And I can understand that. To our best recollection, the 3 dwelling units were residential, being used for a residential purpose at the time. I would just note to council that I'm having reviewed it, I don't honestly feel that sets a precedent. In the first place, the use wasn't changed. They were being used as residential units. Oh, Mr. Larbetsky.
Just a point of clarification, the one building that was the store service station office, that was used by MV Satellite. So that is just a point of clarification.
Okay, all right. Mr. Kelly, maybe you know more about this.
Sorry, I would like to clarify. So to be clear, that property owned by the applicant at that time, there are 4 buildings on the property, 3 are now residential. One, the accessory building was MV Satellite's building. It was in behind Charlie D's gas station at the last use, at least as it was. So that gas station was and retail store was converted to a residential. There was an aged home beside that. It was always residential, probably owned by Freddie Conley at the time. The rear building that's now residential was Dr. Koulis's medical office, for those that recall that. So there was only 1 residential building there. The other 2 would have required, if things had been followed properly, change of use and probably studies at the time with the removal of the gas tanks to convert that from a gas station or fuel fill-up station and retail operation to a residential, and then a professional office moved into a residential building as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kelly. So that particular zoning bylaw amendment, though, did occur prior to our most recent update of the Renfrew County official plan, which obviously has happened since 2011. So I just want to go to Mr. Cheeseman and ask him if he could clarify for me if 3 residential uses are allowed on one piece of property. And if so, how that works. If there are 3 separate dwellings, or is there some leeway here?
The bylaw right now says 1 single attached dwelling on a lot. And if somebody wants 2 or 3 or 4, they would need to get a rezoning, and you would review those on a case-by-case basis. The issue about second dwelling units, I might as well take an aside to talk about that. There is a policy in the OP now, the official plan, which I put in my report regarding secondary dwelling units. That's a provision in the OP that is required by provincial legislation, that the number of years ago, the Planning Act was amended, that municipalities are to put a policy in their official plans permitting, as of right, 2 dwellings on a lot. And subject to then doing a zoning bylaw and listing that in the actual bylaw. We have a case here where we have a county OP from a few years ago. It's been approved. The township zoning bylaw, as council knows, lags some of these other policies of the official plan. And in the fullness of time, we will update the zoning bylaw. And in the fullness of time, you would have an updated comprehensive zoning bylaw that would allow 2 dwelling units on a property, which is usually can be 2 single attached dwellings. It can also be an in-law flat, like in the basement. Interestingly, the current government amended the Planning Act to put in the Planning Act what's called additional residential units, which would allow 3 on a property. You'd have to put your policies in the plan to permit that, which you would be required, and then a zoning bylaw to do that. But it's not 3 separate dwellings. It would be a dwelling, the main dwelling. It could be a basement apartment, and then maybe an apartment over an accessory building. So there's a lot of there's a lot of different, lot of moving parts to this. But in terms of 3 dwellings on a lot, somebody can propose it. It would need a rezoning, as is the case here, and then you review it to determine whether it is appropriate. If somebody was going for 2 dwelling units on a property, the OP would say you almost got to permit it, subject to certain criteria, mind you. But if you want to do 3 dwelling units, 3 separate detached dwellings, you have to look at it, and you would look at the issues that I pointed out, hydrogeology, and all the other things that we talked about, site plan and so forth. So to answer your question, 3 dwelling units can be proposed, but you have to go through a zoning and a planning process and a public meeting like we're doing today.
Okay. All right, but it would be the challenge that the application faces is the size of the property being 1 acre. So it barely meets the minimum for under the OP for 1 dwelling unit plus 1 secondary dwelling unit in terms of size of the property. I think, you know, I recognize that it's obviously challenging when you're dealing with existing buildings. For council to look at moving this forward with 3 separate buildings being used as residences, we know that's going to mean 3 wells, 3 septics on an acre. I can tell you, I live on half an acre and I had to redo my septic system last fall. It was challenging to find the space that wasn't exactly where the old septic system was, but was still within the appropriate distance from my well. So, you know, I certainly recognize the Kellys would have a fairly big challenge to ensure that they could actually accommodate 3 wells, 3 septics, plus parking on an acre. It's probably more feasible to look at the question of having a primary residence and a secondary dwelling unit, the 2 buildings, whichever 2 buildings. And I'm not saying which, I'm just saying it's probably more feasible that could be achieved under the planning in conjunction with good planning, because it does require an acre up to 2 acres, between an acre and up to 2 acres. So if the hydrogeological study was done, it could demonstrate to council that it would be acceptable for there to be 2 residential units there, separate units. However, it does sort of, I would question whether or not a third building, I'm not saying which building, but a third building could then be transformed also into a residential unit. It's more likely to end up being an accessory use to the 2 residential units that would be acceptable under what we have in planning. Certainly, before council could, you know, go the distance and say, yes, we want to, we are comfortable with 3 residential units. And as I said, 3 wells, 3 septics, or even 1 well shared and 3 septics, we would have to see the hydro-G study, because it would have to demonstrate that there wasn't going to be an impact to their property or to the neighbors, to ensure that we were implementing good planning. So Mr. Kelly, I'm sure you can see where I find this challenging. And so maybe I'll just let you speak to that, if you wouldn't mind.
I absolutely can. So I think what you've brought up are decent items to discuss, very valid. I think what Mr. Cheeseman is trying to accomplish with the zoning bylaw, and I'm not going to pretend what he's trying to accomplish, he'll speak to that himself, is the fact that he has placed a holding zone on that. So I think what we need to do is get down to the granular level of what's being accomplished by this zoning bylaw. What it does, first and foremost, is it creates a dwelling unit that is not subordinate to the use of the church. It creates a dwelling unit, which is the mission hall, to stand on its own, and that the other 2 buildings, and let's be clear, we don't own the mission house, right? We don't even know if we ever will or otherwise, right? I mean, that could be decades down the road. It's the township-owned facility. The only way we'd ever get ownership is if the township agreed in some fashion to turn it back to us. And again, not being talked about, right? So we're not even discussing that. The holding zone allows for up to 2 buildings, accessory in nature, so the church and or the mission house. Should it be determined at a future time that those get converted, we will have to go through the studies that you've referenced, the hydro-G, the septic, the nitrate study, and otherwise, to make sure it fits. And that may involve a number of, you know what, we could be 50 years later and a dune filtration system that's been invented. We don't know. But this allows council at that time to determine if the studies are acceptable to you to remove that holding zone. But again, the granular level of all this is to allow the dwelling unit that's being currently converted to stand on its own without being subordinate to the use of the church building.
Okay. I think our challenge is that you've presented us with an application that speaks to the future.
That's what I asked in my preamble. We tried to make it, we were guided to make this future-proof, to allow for those things to happen in the future without spending another $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 again and again and again. So I think this is a very creative solution, and one that still is in writing on the zoning bylaw, the comprehensive zoning bylaw, that will state there's a holding zone. There are a few other places in the Madawaska Valley that have holding zones, most likely subdivision growth areas, where should you complete these tasks 1 through 5, then we will consider, I'll say that word strongly, you'll still be able to consider whether or not we are allowed at that time. And that council, this council, or another council might still say at that time, you've met those tests. However, we still don't consider this appropriate planning at that time.
Okay, thank you. So I think that this is one of the challenges that council is facing because this application does sort of provide a glimpse into a potential future. It's maybe perhaps not as simple as a straightforward, I've got a some odd thing going on that can be addressed through a zoning bylaw amendment. We are looking at a path through time. In terms of for my own personal comfort, to be able to have a better sense of the property, I noticed, Mr. Kelly, you do know where the septic systems are. I think it's really important that council know where the septic systems are to the best of your ability to identify them, because when we did get the drawing that was significantly clearer than what was in the package yesterday, so much more made sense when I could see it with my senior's eyes. But I really would like to know where the septics are, because again, that is going to be one of the things that is important in terms of where driveways go, where parking is, and a better understanding of the property itself. I think this is a piece of information that would be helpful to council in making this decision. It would help to know the full layout, and that's the one thing that is missing. The other point, I know we have the operations manager listening, and I'm wondering if he could speak to the driveway application, because normally there would be something, I would expect something to be in the report, in the package, that would identify that it's acceptable. So the absence of it, I'd just like to have some information from the operations manager on the proposed second driveway. Also, another matter that I'm sure is important to the applicants, so they can figure out how to best utilize the property. Hillary, are you able to speak to the driveway application?
Yes, I am. Good morning, all. So the applicant provided a application for an entranceway a while back, and it was directly west on your site plan. And I have investigated, and there's 3 issues I see. There's a hydro pole. The applicant failed to determine how he would deal with the hydro pole. I have no idea. And the slope and the distance doesn't meet the criteria, the way I see.
Okay, so you have some concerns with where the second driveway is proposed. Okay,
Yes.
and has the applicant been made aware of that? I mean, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I have worked with him. He's mentioned, I considered the meeting on site, and that hasn't happened. So there is some, the slope of the land also has issues where the driveway is. And there's a hydro pole and also the vision requirements.
Okay, so there are some challenges that would have to be worked through if the second driveway was to be put in place.
Correct.
Okay. So are there any other questions from this discussion from council? Any other questions or comments from council? Councillor Schulist.
Yes, to you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, very, very interesting. As a heritage buff, I got very excited when this land was being purchased by the Kellys, and I know they value heritage, and that's very important. They're business people, and we have heard from the public, and I can sense that council is not ready to make a decision today. I would definitely love to see Councillor Wilmer at the meeting. Yeah, and a few other things that have to be put together. But one thing, we need to work together, because really it is going to improve our community, how this is all going to unfold. It's about a good, healthy discussion between council and the applicant. So welcome to the community. Oh, you
Okay,
are from the community. Okay, thank you.
thank you, Councillor Schulis. So I don't think that what I'm hearing from council is not there's no way this can happen, or there's no way that there isn't a path forward. There is a path forward. I think it just needs to be found and fine-tuned here. Council, you have options, which come from page 24 of your, now it may not be 24 of the most updated package, but sorry, I'm referring to the package that you received on Friday. In the letter from the county, it is identified that council does have options, and they are: in considering the application, council may approve, refuse, or hold the zoning amendment application in abeyance pending further information. So obviously, we're not stuck with this is a do or die situation today. I would suspicion from what I'm hearing that we want this process to have a successful outcome, but it still doesn't quite have some of the details that we would hope we would be involved in that successful outcome. Some things need to be worked out. So I'm wondering if we could just identify at this point. Certainly, I know we'd like to know where the septics are. We would certainly like to have a better understanding of is there a solution to the second driveway? There may be a solution we're unaware of at this point, but certainly we would like to know if there's a way to solve the second driveway problem. And then the other thing would be, is there a solution to the question of, is it 3 separate dwelling units, speaking to the future, as the applicants have suggested, as a possibility, or is council only, do we only feel that within the confines of planning that exists today, that the application would better be a primary dwelling, a secondary dwelling unit, and an accessory building, for example, which would conform? Does council feel, and I have to find out from council, do you feel there's a need to do the hydrogeological study before you can provide final approval of the application? I'm looking for, between the applicant and Mr. Cheeseman and Mr. Larbetsky, I'm looking for a path forward where we can get to a successful position for everyone. But I don't think we're there yet today. And maybe I'll just go to Mr. Kelly, because I see he would like to speak to what I'm saying.
So a couple of things, thank you, Mayor, through you. So a couple of things I'd just like to address that are more pertinent to the zoning meeting we're having today. Driveway issue is not a zoning issue, as I see it, as we see it. The driveway is an issue that there is a township bylaw as it relates to working through the process should an applicant or a landowner wish to have a second driveway on their property. And that would require a properly engineered with the approval of the operations manager, a memo and a report going to council to consider at that time. This is a second driveway. We're not asking for a severance to ask for a primary driveway. If a driveway isn't there, we may not move ahead. We may put a driveway the other place. We may propose a parking pad. Again, there is a process in place the township has, and we're willing to work through that process. But again, we don't consider that a zoning issue nor pertinent to the zoning application. There is a driveway on this lot, and it services all 3 properties quite well at this time. To address the septic issue, again, we have uncovered the septic tank. We are in the works to look at the header pipe on our septic. The second septic, for those who don't know, the Mission House has its own dry point well and its own septic tank and leach field. While it's on our property, I don't feel comfortable uncovering that septic nor uncovering that septic tank, because really It is a municipally owned structure that is now yours, right? You are, by the nature of the lease, responsible for the care and control of that septic and that leach field. So I don't feel comfortable uncovering that septic field and or the tank itself without prior permission from the Township Council. And in the absence of records, we anecdotally know where things are, but we don't have the actual measurements where things are. Of course, we're even cautious not to drive over the septic tank all winter. So I would need that in writing from the township and those costs. Again, we believe that the zoning bylaw has those things built into future development, right? The septic tank has been confirmed by your CBO that is adequate for the conversion of this one dwelling thus far. The other dwellings, should they be converted, will have to meet a series of tests that we're more than happy to work through. But at this time, we're just looking to move forward with the zoning for a property. Should something happen with the other two, even more simply, should something happen with the church building, because we do own that structure, then we will have to go through a series of tests to make sure that that works. So it shouldn't hold up the zoning.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Council, I'll come back to you for discussion on the points then that you've heard so far. Again, I'm sorry, Mr. Henstock, the time for public input is past. Members of council, I'm seeking some direction from you and some discussion that is going to provide us with a path forward. Councillor Bromwich.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Once again, I think that there's enough liability built into this zoning that we're talking about right now that addresses all the issues you brought up, and I think that some of the public has brought up, that down the road it's being addressed. I can't see a delay in this. I would like to see it go through. Just my personal opinion, I think they've covered all the bases. We do have CBOs checking this out. If there's any additional changes to be made, they have to meet our regulations through our CBO, and they've built that in. I can't see why a delay is necessary in this particular time. So I'm for moving ahead with this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other members of council? Councillor Poplinski. Oh, sorry, sir, you're muted.
Oh, thanks, Mayor Love. I think we should, as I suggested earlier, I think we should look at more information which has come about. I think we should take the advice of the county, where one of the options is to put it on hold till further questions have been answered. I think there are too many questions that could be of greater concern. I don't profess to be an expert in development or dealing with issues like the Condo Act, and I'm wondering, is there a mini condo act that we could, or the provision in the under the Condo Act that we could consider in dealing with the septic and water? Because it's a common element, and that's something. And if it's not, I would certainly, we have with us today Mr. Cheeseman, and he could answer that question and put my mind at ease on that. But that was something that came about. But I really don't feel that we're prepared at this time to move forward on this application.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Schulis, did you wish to weigh in?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councillor Poplinski right at this moment. I know I'd really be more comfortable with Councillor Wilmer being present. Yeah, just a little bit more time. We've heard from the public now, just a few items there to fine tune, and maybe at the next meeting we could make a decision. But you know, to me, I'm pro development. Definitely, we want to move forward, absolutely, but we want to also do it correctly. Thank you very much.
Okay, maybe I could seek some clarification from, I'm not sure whom to seek it from, maybe Mr. Cheeseman or Mr. Lorbetsky. Are the Kellys able to proceed with the conversion of the hall to a residential use under the current zoning? Mr. Lorbetsky. Sorry, I just don't know who could answer that one.
I'll make an attempt. Thank you, Mayor Love. We have sought legal advice on this for the municipality, and it was advised that we could proceed with the conversion of the existing building, as Mr. and Mrs. Kelly are currently doing. A building permit was issued for that. So under the current zoning, yes, thank you.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that you weren't going to be halted in your tracks because that wouldn't, I don't think that's the intent of council. All right. Again, this is very challenging. I don't know if Mr. Cheeseman, if there's anything you could help me to weed through this to come up with. Is there any advice you can give me? I mean, I'm doing my best here, but I'm trying to figure out how do we have a path forward?
Well, thank you, Mayor Love, members of council. Deciding on a zoning amendment it's a council decision. That's the first thing I learned in planning many years ago. So depending on where you're heading and where it seems you're going, council can make a motion that you table this item. But I think there should be some kind of parameters around when you're going to reconvene and what you're looking for, so that everybody can turn their minds to resolving whatever the issues are. Councillor Poplinski's put a site inspection on the table. If that was part of a motion, that is a possibility. If you want to have the Hydro G study done up front, that should be put down in a motion, or you can still say we want to think about it. But I think I'm getting into more of how you structure motions at a council table, which is not my expertise. Mm-hmm. But there should be some direction, and Sue might be able to help with this, that gives everybody an understanding of the lie of the land and where we're headed, and so that it's not just left drifting. If that's of any help, I hope it is.
Okay, yes, and I concur. I'm not trying to leave us in a position where we're saying, whoa, let's wait, but there's not a clear point at which we would reconvene on this matter. And we also need to know what steps will be taken to gather what information, whatever information council feels would make them more comfortable with approving the application. I don't want to leave either side of this in a position where they can't proceed forward and gather that information. Mr. Larbetsky, is this meeting the meeting in which we would do this sort of a motion, or would it be something we would do in a council meeting? Mr. Larbetsky.
Thank you, Mayor Love. I believe that it has to be done at this particular meeting.
Okay.
One of the things that I'm thinking, and Mr. Cheeseman has alluded to, that we don't just leave this hanging, because under the Planning Act, we have an obligation to process an application within so many days of receipt of it. So I think we have to conform to the Planning Act requirements, and maybe Mr. Cheeseman can elaborate on just what I've touched. Furthermore, I think if we do adjourn, it has to be an adjournment, and then the meeting has to be reconvened, and possibly a specific date prior to the expiration of the requirements of the Planning Act. Mr. Cheeseman, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Silas, and for the rest of the group. So what the Planning Act is an interesting piece of legislation. It asks for transparency, it asks for information, it wants the public input, but it also asks for timely decisions and efficiency. And those two things are difficult to deal with at the same time. So and basically when they changed the act a number of years ago at the province, they don't want a municipality to just sit on an application indefinitely. There has to be a process that applicants can expect a timely decision. What the act says is that after 90 days, if a municipality has not made a decision on a zoning amendment, the applicant could appeal to the local planning appeal tribunal on the basis that they're not working on our file, and it's not a good process. So it's rare that section is invoked, but it can be by the applicants or anybody. That's why I think that if you do leak over that 90 days, it's the understanding that you're actually working to resolve some issues, deal with some of the comments, meet council's expectations, and not simply to just let this thing sit on a shelf somewhere and collect dust. That there's an expectation that there's going to be a decision, and to address all the issues in front of council.
Okay, thank you. Is that 90 days from today? 90 days sounds like a huge amount of time, but is it 90 days from today or from when the application was submitted?
When the application was submitted and we, through the township, it was deemed complete. I forget the date, February sometime. So March, April, I think we've got a month. I think we're 60 days in, Silas, something like that.
Okay.
So, thank you.
All right. No, I just wanted to identify that clearly so we understood that. Then I'll go to Sue.
Just seeking clarification from either Silas or Charles, whichever motion council puts on the table. If they're holding this in abeyance for clarity, it has to be based on the planning matter. I know we've brought up some other issues as it pertains to, possibly parking, the lease, or other issues, but it has to be specifically about the planning. The other issues would be dealt with under different processes under the building code and or the site plan at a later time, correct?
I would think so. And I think that you need to give direction to everybody. As I said, what does council's looking for information? What do you need to make a decision? The way the bylaw was structured, the hydro G was going to be done at the removal of the holding symbol. If that's not satisfactory, I think you need to make some kind of judgment on that. I know Mr. Kelly's spoken about the site plan issues. They can be rolled into this if you wish, if that's your concern. I don't want to pretend to, I don't want to make the decision for you, but that is a concern. Number of dwellings on the property, that is a number of concern. That's a legitimate issue. It may never be 3 dwellings. It may only ever be 2, but I can't make that answer for you. But as long as the motion is enough that it deals with planning and provides some, what are you looking for?
Okay. So I think for myself, the biggest concern I have is permitting 3 single detached dwellings, and to, even with the holding symbol, to be accepting of that without knowing that the hydro G is going to show that that is going to actually be something that can happen. I don't know where that would leave us if we were to accept the holding symbol and then it would turn out that the hydrogeological study showed that no, it could not happen. Maybe could you speak to that for me, Mr. Cheeseman, just in general?
If you pass it with the holding symbol and the applicants or whoever owns the land cannot get a satisfactory hydrogeological study, then the holding symbol stays on and they don't build that extra dwelling. So
okay,
it's a permanent hold until that issue is resolved. Okay.
So my challenge is that for me, it is that if we are going to, even with the holding symbol, if we're going to say, yes, there can be 3 separate dwellings, residential dwellings, this change of use on this 1 acre lot, then I really do want, this to be successful. So the hydrogeological study would need to be done. If the applicant was considering instead 1 residential dwelling with a second dwelling unit, both of them separate buildings, not saying which ones, then I recognize under our planning it would still require the study to be done, but I'd be less concerned. And I'm only speaking for myself, so I'm hoping to encourage some discussion from council here. I would be less concerned with the study having to be done immediately and more prepared to accept the concept of a holding symbol before a second change of use occurred to a residential use. Just speaking for myself. Sorry, I was going to call you counselor. I'm demoting you, Mr. Larbetsky.
Thank you, Mayor Love. Yes, one of my concerns is with the Hydro G study and the confines of time, whether one could even be completed within a time frame. So as Mr. Cheeseman has stated, the holding symbol is placed there. So the Kellys can't get this rezoning today and just forge ahead doing the 3 buildings, developing that property. That holding is in place until it is to the satisfaction of the municipality, whether it's this current council or a future council. That is why the holding symbol is placed on that. Just a little sidebar, I currently have a situation where there is a holding symbol. The proponent has asked that it be removed so the development can go forward. And they have been specifically told until all the works are completed to the satisfaction of the municipality and to council will that holding symbol be removed. Thank you.
Okay. I guess that doesn't still help me with the planning issue. If we're looking at permitting 3 single detached dwellings versus a primary dwelling and a secondary residence with an accessory use for one other building, it doesn't sort of, I guess I'm stuck on that. Okay, how the heck do I bring this to some sort of useful resolution by council? I'm looking to my staff because I have one member of council who is not prepared to move forward without further information. Well, I think I have 2. One that is, and I am feeling that what's actually being asked under planning doesn't, so I don't know. I'm struggling for the sake of the applicants because what was asked would not conform with the official plan. What's been come back as an exception zone with 3 single detached dwellings doesn't really conform with the official plan either. They don't necessarily want to get too far out of the bounds of where we should be in terms of good planning. And I also don't want to be setting a precedent.
I mean, maybe, and whether it's my job or not, I'll throw this out because I can see we're at an impasse. The motion can be, and I don't know whether council does this, that you will reconvene to consider the driveway issue, the hydro G issue, and the number of dwellings at your next meeting. And that puts you on notice that if you want to add the site visit, that's up to you. But that puts councillors on notice of what they've got to think about and come back in 2 weeks and make your decision. That's a suggestion.
Can the motion, I would like to leave it open as well if the applicants can come up with a solution that would make us feel more confident that we were employing good planning. I'm certainly open to a solution. Mr. Kelly.
Let me try.
Okay.
I thought we did with the holding symbol, but anyway, I think we need to really take a look at this driveway and this access issue is getting mixed up with the zoning act. It really should not. With all due respect, the driveway or proposal therein is going to go through a process, and it was a proposal. It was a first. Here's my $100. We're going to try to figure out another driveway, even if we move forward with it or don't. So I think we really need to separate that out from the zoning issue. That driveway issue will come before council as a second driveway request for the property, not a zoning thing. Definitely not a zoning thing. How it got mixed up in this zoning application is unfortunate, but it really should not have. It's really just it's a public works issue that the operations manager will have to deal with the report to council. What we were trying to accomplish with this, and I think we need to step back, and we can't amend, and I have to say I did talk to planners when an application goes in, can you amend things after the public process has started? And no, you cannot without other notice. Council can, but we can't. We own 2 buildings on that property. We don't own the third, right? We might not. So what I'm hearing from you, Mayor, and perhaps council, is that there is 2 buildings that we have. We may or may not be able to convert the second into a residential, and we'd have to go through a series of costly and timely studies to do so, which we're okay to do. The third building, the township-owned building, could stay as a community facility forever. And I have a museum forever, so long as volunteers, knock on wood, continue doing the work, and the township supports the needed upgrades on whatever they happen to be. We're happy with that. We love the museum beside it. We think it's great. It's a great treasure. I think that the Councillor Schulis used the words earlier. So as a building we don't own, it's kind of weird. It's a weird building to talk about a conversion of. We could easily say in an application, allow us to do the conversion of 2 buildings and leave the community facility at such time as another report is done to do something else later on. But that's what the holding zone suggests, that should something in the future happen to that building, then we have the ability to move within the parameters. That's why it says up to 3 buildings. It doesn't say 2. It doesn't say 3 for certain. It says up to 3. The township, at their costs and their leisure, might decide to move the mission house down the street to the community hall. I don't know. Good luck. It's a big building, but you may do that. It's entirely your building. Do as what you will. And then at that time, if we apply for a building permit for a 3rd building, you might say, no, you didn't meet the hydro G or the septic system, or we're not going to issue a permit, and we'll deal with that at that time. So we're just trying to get to the point of not having a subordinate dwelling, the residential building, that it's not subordinate. We like to convert the church. Let's be clear. We want to convert the church to a residential dwelling at some point in the future. It's going to be expensive as heck. But right now, we just don't want that one building to be subordinate, because we would hate to have someone suggest that we're using the house without using the church at the same time. Going in and using the church to enjoy and using the house just for washrooms, for instance. As it suggests by now, and Mr. Lerbetsky confirmed, I mean, the zoning bylaw suggests it's an accessory use building, the house that we're converting right now, accessory dwelling. That means we can have a party with up to 5 people, I guess, with Mr. Ford in the church, and then just use the dwelling for washrooms and cooking facilities. So we're just trying to remove that subordinate aspect off of it and deal with the future and the studies. And I think that again, the holding zone, it's an emergency brake, a protection brake for county council, or for township council to consider at a future time. And you made a comment that it's not official plan compliant. I think it's compliant with the official plan. It just requires a zoning amendment, because we're not applying for an official plan amendment. We're just applying for a zoning bylaw amendment to be compliant with the official plan. So thank you, Mayor and Council.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I guess my concern, what I was trying to express, and again, probably nowhere near the experience, Mr. Kelly, that you have, and your ability to speak to it with absolutely the correct words. My concern was that typically under our current official plan, 3 residential separate units, dwelling units, would not be allowed on an acre. I don't think it would fly. But anyways, Mr. Cheeseman.
Well, thank you. And that's a good point. I just want to further to what Mr. Kelly said, though. On page 32 of the package is our planning report dealing with 2 dwelling units. This is the secondary policies, which I brought into play, which touch on this proposal, but are not completely consistent, because they're not proposing 2, they're proposing 3 dwellings. So it's page 32, middle of the page, where it says for lots less than 0.8 hectares, but greater than 0.4, a secondary dwelling unit may be considered on a case-by-case basis through the submission of a minor variance application. A minor variance is a lower form of a zoning amendment, but I don't want to get hung up on that. The proponent of an application for 2 dwelling units on a property more than 0.4 hectares should look at such matters as dwelling unit area, minimum lot area, surrounding land uses, and parking. So if parking is something that for 2 dwelling units you would look at, and parking assumes you've got some access. So I'm not so sure I totally agree with Mr. Kelly that the driveway is not something for a later date. And it also says at the end of that paragraph, municipalities may require a site plan prior to the approval. And so when we do site plan developments, we like to see upfront what the proposal is, and then the site plan gets registered on title. But in reviewing a minor variance or zoning amendment, you have, in my opinion, you have the right to look at what's the plan for the property. So I just throw that out there. There was another point. I think what's problematic. There are a number of parts to the zoning bylaw amendment, and that's where the holding symbol comes in. You can wait to deal with things at a later date. You can also unpack the zoning amendment and say, one of the other options is we'll amend the bylaw to allow something, but not these other things right now. So that's another option you always have as well. I don't know if I've muddied the water or cleared it up, but I do think that some of these issues of site plan and parking are legitimate to this issue, and can be looked at if you're not satisfied.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. And again, as I say, I'm trying to figure out how to move this forward today. And remain within the timelines and also be productive on the file, so that we do come to a council can come to a decision that they are comfortable with. What I am at an impasse, because I do not feel council is truly the majority of council isn't comfortable with the application as presented. So I'm trying to figure out how to produce a motion here that is going to get us from today to a day in very short amount of time where we would be comfortable. Obviously, that's not going to involve the completion of a hydrogeological study, because I doubt anyone could get one done in that short order. Councillor Schulist.
Yes, to Madam Mayor. I just want to make it clear here. I'm very comfortable on making a decision today, but I know that Councillor Popinski is not ready, and I respect that. And also, one thing I'm not really comfortable about is that Councillor Wilmer is not present. So I think what we should do, maybe, obviously we're going to have to do a special council meeting at some point here to, to move this forward. So I think what, having said that, because it's time sensitive, and maybe that's what we should do. And if there's some concerns, I don't have any concerns right at this moment, right? So, but the sooner we do it, the better. But I feel quite comfortable what has been presented today. Thank you very much.
Okay. So at this point, 2 members of council are comfortable with the zoning bylaw amendment as presented, and I think 2 of us have a discomfort. Mr. Larbetsky, this wouldn't be a special council meeting. Would it be another planning meeting that we would be arranging?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Would it?
My understanding would be that this meeting would be adjourned until all of council is available to discuss. And Mr. Cheeseman can correct me if I'm wrong, that the uncertainties that are presented here at this meeting could possibly be addressed by the applicant. I do not know whether I have to do additional circulations under the circumstances, or whether it would be just an adjournment until council is satisfied that their concerns have been addressed. Mr. Cheeseman, can you elaborate?
I guess, thank you, Sas. So one of your questions was if it's adjourned, a notice to the people that were part of the process. I would suspect, given the transparency of the Planning Act, that anybody who had an interest in this file could be notified of a reconvening. You have suggested an idea that this be, put back to the applicant, that you've heard some of these concerns. Are there ways that you have to address them and come back with a potential, either the same plan or a plan B, recognizing that you've heard the issues, although it's not unanimous, that there's some site plan issues, some parking issues, and hydro-G issues. How would you propose to address those to move the file forward, and the public concerns as well? So that is an option, 2 sides that you've laid out. That could be the basis of the motion.
Okay. Would council be willing then to do that, to adjourn, I think you said, this meeting, and reschedule and ask that more information be brought to council on the parking issues? The parking issue obviously directly is affected by whether or not there's a driveway. I think council would also need to provide permission to the Kellys to investigate the septic. Certainly we would want to provide them with that permission, and we'll have to have discussion maybe in our council meeting in regards to that. Would we be prepared to take an adjournment today to see if more information then makes council more comfortable with the application as it's presented, or as it may be slightly, as the situation may be adjusted? Councillor Poplinski.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Love. Hopefully I'm hooked up there.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I just, we spent a lot of time talking about the driveway and so on, which can be dealt with perhaps with minor variances and so on. I'm just, as I look at the correspondence that we received from the residents on the street, one of the major opposition to this particular application is because the intended use for short-term rentals, and that with it brings a whole lot of concerns which have been well voiced. And I would feel a lot more comfortable if that could be addressed, and along with the other issues that's been mentioned. It's one thing to put it off, but if we're not addressing some of those concerns expressed by the people, then I don't think we've done a very thorough job. So I would like to see that discussed, because there's many, it's not just driveways, it's not just moving hydropoles, and it's what's going to happen on that street. It's going to change forever. I have to agree. And the short-term rentals, I think, is what it's all about. This is not just long-term rentals where people are going to move in and live there. We're going to be bringing a lot of people into that area. And so let's put it out on the table. Let's talk about it. And I think everybody will feel more comfortable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Poplinski. I do have to note to council that Madawaska Valley does not license or regulate short-term rentals, short-term rental accommodations. So we have to be mindful that's perhaps not an area we want to step in. If we're not doing it throughout the rest of the municipality, we have to be mindful that this would not be a point in time where we would be imposing that on an applicant without having the proper licensing and regulations and bylaws that we would need in place. So I'm not sure that's an issue that we can discuss with any authority, to be blunt. But I would like to gather some more of this information and bring this back in short order if we could. I don't know, Sue, if I'm again trying to write a motion off the top of my head in short order in front of everyone. I don't actually have something to hand. I'm wondering, Sue, you are my miracle worker. Is there a motion that you could help me to put forward that we could adjourn this meeting and I'd like to set a date to come back and with information that would address the issues we've heard today. If it could be the next, if we could reconvene the meeting at the next council and committee meeting, just prior to that council and committee meeting even. I'm trying to think of what the date is. I'll grab it quick. Which would be May 4th. And, Mr. Kelly, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. No, that's fine. So ultimately, as the applicants, we're the ones that spend the money to get these studies done, as we enjoy to do. We need to be clear from either Mr. Cheeseman or Ms. Klatt or otherwise what those requirements are. So I guess we heard comments, but if it means spending thousands of dollars for hydro Gs and otherwise that still don't meet the satisfaction of council after we go through that, to be quite blunt, I'm not sure why we would. So I guess I don't know if there's conditions to a motion that say to the satisfaction therein or thereof that meet that satisfaction, because we could still do an hydro G or a septic inspection that still don't advance that, and then we'd be spending time, energy, and money, quite honestly, wasting council's time and wasting our own time if we could just continue with what we have now. So what I would request that with your motion during this meeting, and again in the open meeting of Township Council later today, is that the motion clearly delineates what you're asking of the applicant, of us, and if it will make this motion move forward or just create another conversation. Because I just don't think churning and spinning and wasting money or spending money is worthwhile to anybody when we have built protection into this for future development plans. For them, not for us, for them, for you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what this will look like then. What would we need to have identified in order to be comfortable with accepting an exception zone that would permit 3 single detached dwellings with the holding zone that would apply to the 2 additional dwellings? Council, Councillor Poplinski, you feel you need to have a site visit.
If I may, Mayor Love, yes, I think it would be very helpful. I think we, even at the time that we're going through right now, I think if we use caution in doing that, I think it would be really worthwhile.
Okay, I'm assuming you're requesting the site visit with the applicants.
That would be preferred, yes.
Now, I'm going to go to the applicants and ask, because these are difficult times health-wise. Would you be willing to do a carefully distanced, masked site visit? And you don't have to answer me right away.
No, I feel we do have to answer you right away because these are meetings. Sorry, I mean, it's time is of the essence for everybody.
Yes.
I guess to what end? We don't disagree with meeting, and listen, I'll go back to November when we all said anytime pick up the phone. I heard from a few members of council. We've been open and willing to meet. A little difficult, I guess. There are regulations around who gets to gather and who doesn't. We can have that done, but in the absence of a clear list of things that you want to see when you're on site, I'm not clear what that would accomplish. So I guess my point is, sure, with major protections built in, and I want to be sure that when you're on site, we've had people in to uncover the septics and have had things looked at and all these other things, right? Which will take time and money and effort, right? So we will do those things, but I can't speak on behalf of the contractors when I can get someone in right now for digging a hole where the header pipe is, for instance. So I would like for that meeting to be fulsome, but trying to get to that point would be a little difficult. So yeah. So do we bring the septic inspector? So we'll just try to. There's lots of logistics to sort out.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Mr. Lerbetsky.
Thank you, Mayor Love. I'm very concerned with the site meeting due to the fact that we are in a lockdown where people aren't supposed to gather, and we have to face reality. COVID is a serious thing. I just got word that a close friend died of COVID, and that individual lived in a home that a home care worker was coming to. So I don't want to put anyone in any jeopardy. And it come back to, we were obeying the rules, but the planning people and the council just had a gathering. So I would say no to the gathering. Whether it would be individuals, go and have a look at the property and then have a Zoom meeting, and based on the site plan that was provided, make some comments on that and present that and readdress it. I don't know if that's possible, but that's a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, I certainly think I'd be far more comfortable with it being a matter for individual members of council to arrange with the owners of the property if they wish to go and look, rather than this to be a gathering and with municipal staff and council. I have one member of council who feels this is important to their decision making. Would the Kellys be willing to make arrangements to address that with that member of council?
I guess to what end? We just need to be clear. If you're on site, what do you want to see, right? And we'll try to accommodate that as best as possible. If you want to see something particular, the property is the property. The Mission House, obviously, you can come see anytime. It's your building and your access to that. It's there, sure. But again, to what end? What do you want to see? If I can just have that spelled out when you're on site, what do you want to see? And we'll try to oblige, right? And that if that makes a difference or not, then so be it.
Okay, so is that something that could be discussed? Certainly you could have a conversation via phone with Councillor Poplinski, have that discussion and determine if that is a worthwhile activity. Councillor, you could let the owners know what it is you wish to see. Could we do it that way? And then, you can determine between you whether that would work. Councillor Poplinski.
I think we're unmuted now.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it could be helpful. I raised the issue because of some of the other discussion about moving things and making allowances in certain areas. I thought it would be helpful. I'm more concerned about some of the other issues that people have raised in their letters. And as I mentioned a little while ago about the short-term rentals, and there's a few other things which I think need to be addressed.
Okay, Sue.
So might I suggest that the motion that planning is going to be recommending should include something that I guess I need your guidance, Charles and Silas. If this goes to LPAT, under what circumstance do you have probable reason to hold an abeyance and to adjourn and reconvene? To the point of short-term rentals, I think that is something that is township-wide. It's not dependent on this zoning. It's certainly something we can bring forward, but I don't know if this goes to LPAT, is that a reason for reconvening? So that's something that would be a staff direction for us to bring forward to do a township-wide review possibly. But having said that, I think if the suggestion of the planning manager is that we adjourn and reconvene, we could choose a date. But I would ask that if it states, whereas all members of council were not able to be in attendance, and whereas clarification is required as it pertains to parking and access, the purpose of the H symbol, as well as scheduling a meeting between council and the applicant to seek further clarification. I'm not sure if that is something that would be considered or not.
Okay, Mr. Kelly.
Certainly not jumping on the CAO's.
No, I'm just,
No,
we're just going around. I just need to.
I would never make a suggestion to a CEO. All I'm suggesting, we've had an aside. What we're concerned with, while happy to talk to any member of council individually, I am concerned that broken telephone may or may not happen. So I think while we're happy that folks can go out onto site and inspect, I suppose, things that are of concern, you can't inspect a short-term rental. That's not inspection worthy. That's just a conversation. I would rather a conversation happen with a quorum of council members to make a decision, so everybody hears and asks the questions all at once. We already are hearing today there's one council member missing. So in absentia, no decisions are being made. So at least I would like a conversation with 4 or 5 members of council, just so it's on the record, as opposed to I talked to Councillor Bromwich and then Councillor Schulis, Councillor Pinsky, and Mayor Love, or Councillor Wilmer, that everybody hears or asks the same question. So we're all at least on a page, maybe not the same page, but on a page, so we can have that in the public record. But go ahead and walk the property anytime. Yeah.
Okay, so could council then, members of council who have questions specific to the property that the owners could address, could you submit those questions to Sue to provide to the owners in writing? And then perhaps when we reconvene the this planning meeting, it would provide the owners with an opportunity to respond to those questions. I think that would be the questions that would then be provided to the public as a part of the reconvened meeting. The owners could have an opportunity to provide their responses in writing, and I think that's important. That this process is I agree with Mr. Kelly that it be a public process. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot or not have them have the correct amount of time to be able to do these things. Council, certainly we will be discussing the question of the septic system that we are responsible for the maintenance of. I think we better be discussing that today so that we can confirm that how we want to proceed with that in terms of knowing where it is. Certainly the Kellys, Mr. Kelly is absolutely correct. He can't go digging around a septic system that he's not responsible for. So I think we need to provide that permission and come to an agreement about how that would proceed. And then the parking issue, I'd like to give an opportunity to see if the driveway can be worked out. So that, obviously driveways and parking go together. You can't get to one without the other. So is this an approach we can take to come back to this. And then I guess my final concern is with the question of there being 3 single detached dwellings as the future potential residential use of the property. And perhaps the Kellys there's something they can provide that would, because it isn't their application request for 3 separate single detached dwellings. They have asked for one residential use change for 1 dwelling and 2 residential use changes for 2 separate secondary dwellings. That was what they applied for. I don't know if there's a solution there.
Up to. I just want to
Up
make
to.
clear. It's up to, right? There's a certain nuance that it's up to. Right?
Yes.
Sorry, I want to say there's that nuance that it's important to know.
Absolutely, Mr. Kelly, and please, I am not offended in any way by a correction. This has been a long morning. I'm sure we're all tired, and I can make mistakes. Absolutely. So I know this is difficult direction, but would that be helpful? Councillor Wilmer would then also be submitting his questions in writing so that the applicants could address them. Sue?
With the council indulgence, I would just much prefer that, so if we adjourn and reconvene a date to do that, but that it include that there be a council meeting, seeing the inferences that have been made and the concern that possibly staff are not forwarding everything to council. I would prefer there be a scheduled council meeting and all that correspondence be presented at that time.
Okay. All right. Good grief. So, Mr. Kelly, I don't know your schedule. Is this then something that we could reconvene May 5th? Reconvene the planning meeting May 5th? I think I have something else I'll have to defer, but. So we will provide, our council will provide their questions to you so that you, that needs to happen, I would say, within a week. We need a deadline. Council, if you have questions, they need to be provided in writing to Sue, so Sue can provide them to the applicants and they have time to respond. Mr. Larbetsky? Have I done something wrong again?
No, thank you, Mayor Love. I was just going to point out that on May the 4th, we do have a planning meeting. I have 2 applications to deal with on May the 4th, and that is the committee and council date meeting. So I would recommend that rather than making any resolution, I think everybody has heard over and over again the concerns that are being addressed, and that be put in writing and submitted, as you stated, maybe to Sue or to myself, so that an agenda can be presented, or an amendment to this agenda, some additional information can be put together on Thursday, which would be the 29th of April, so that there is no out of office, out of meeting discussion with anyone. It's all brought to council and the applicants and the people concerned at the same time at the reconvened meeting on May the 4th. Thank you.
Okay, so if council's questions were provided to you on, you're saying on the 29th, Mr. Larbetsky, is that sufficient time, Mr. and Mrs. Kelly, for you to compile your response for a May 4th planning, for the May 4th meeting? I'm sorry.
Sure. It may or may not answer the questions about the size and location of septic tanks, right? I mean, we know roughly where everything is, but to get it fully analyzed and all those other things might take time. And I am not aware of the contractor or his availability. So if that is a concern, again, not having seen those concerns on the 29th, I don't know if we can answer the questions by the 4th, I guess, to be more clear. I mean, so you're asking how, how big is the size of, what's the size of the length of string? So at this point, we'll do our best.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Again, only asking for you to do your best in that. Okay. So Sue, could you formulate a motion around that? we would have to reconvene this planning meeting, complete this planning meeting, and then start the second planning meeting, would we not, Mr. Lerbetsky? Thank you. Okay, just wanted to be clear about that. We better put that council meeting back a while. Okay. Oh,
Madam Mayor,
sir.
can I ask a question? Do you mind if
Sure.
I interject while there's a resolution going on, and maybe we're having an aside? I just need to be clear, is the main problem, I understand there may be other concerns, is it the 3 buildings? If council was to amend to say up to 2 residential units with an accessory dwelling, would that change the view of council as it pertains to this one? Is it the number 3 or is it something else?
Certainly for my concerns, it's the number 3, decidedly. If, you know, what you just suggested, if you were looking at 2 residential buildings and an accessory building, and I'm not saying which one is which, because I don't think that needs to happen. I think I am more comfortable that we would then be able to fall under our Renfrew County official plan and move forward. And I would also be more, I'm speaking for myself, I would be more comfortable with the holding of the Hydro G potentially even then, as you developed one. But definitely I think that fits better with what we see than the 3. The 3 concerns me. I think it starts to set up some problems on a 1 acre lot. Mr. Kelly.
So I just want to be clear, and we can't obviously change our application. So I just want to be clear on that. So I guess that's a question maybe for Charles. So can the church be converted to residential with the dwelling that we're currently converting? The accessory building is the Mission House Museum as a serviced accessory dwelling. Can that happen? I know we're talking again, really semantics, but 2 would be residential, basically the Mission Hall, the church conversion. You know, if we need to increase the size of a leach field, let's say, because I know the tank is large enough to accommodate probably 1 washroom in the church, let's say. But the Mission House would exist as an accessory dwelling with its own septic and well. That's what we're basically suggesting could happen if council was to amend the bylaw, the zoning bylaw amendment to do so. And I guess I'm just looking for clarification if that would. Again, we can't make that amendment because we've already submitted an application. But that's, I think, where I'm hearing council is leaning in some fashion, or at least the mayor is. So I'm asking for clarification on that, please.
Mm-hmm.
So if I maybe try to answer, Mayor Love, and council, I think there's a bit disconnect between what the mayor has said and what Mr. Kelly has just said. I think the mayor was saying 2 residences and 1 accessory building. And if I'm not mistaken, Craig, you said 2 residences and the Mission House is an accessory dwelling.
No, Mission House is accessory building. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
Okay, that's good.
Accessory building, a service, or against the nuance, is a serviced accessory building.
Right. Is a serviced accessory building allowed?
That's basically
a service building with an existing well and septic system. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not a residence.
I was wondering when there might be some other options put on the table. And I think if that's being considered, Silas, I don't know what the process is for doing that, so that if the Kellys are really interested in taking what they've heard today and maybe rejigging the proposal, maybe that's an option for you folks to come back to council with something. That's just an idea. And whether you need to amend the application or we do it through a letter, I don't know the procedure, Silas, but or whether you want to wait Craig, to wait till we go through this process on May 4th and then come back with your plan B? Or do you want to go forward with plan B right now? But it would need everybody to look at plan B and give some time to do a planning report and response.
So, Mr. Cheeseman, could I suggest that what Mr. Kelly has just suggested falls somewhere between what was applied for and what this whole permit 3 single detached dwellings? He's basically suggested there may be somewhere in the middle between what he's applied for and what the County of Renfrew's zoning letter and the zoning bylaw amendment in draft is proposing. I don't know. To me, it looks like it's somewhere in the middle, and that might be, certainly that might be more doable with the holding symbol for the conversion of the second of Mr. Kelly, Mr. and Mrs. Kelly's second building. I think I'll be clear about that into residential.
Yeah, yeah, you can, this is not unlike when we do severance applications, people can amend their proposal before a decision is made. I don't know with Silas at the township, how you would, people want to amend a bylaw, can they use the current application and make some changes? Do they do it in a letter? But what would be I think if it's going to be done, there should be an action by the applicant to put a particular proposal forward.
Mr. Larbetsky.
Having heard the last few comments, I think what can happen is if the applicants, the Kellys, are willing to an amendment to the bylaw. Currently, our provincial policy statement, the OP, allows 2 dwelling units on a property. That council amend the bylaw accordingly to allow the 2 dwelling units, and that the museum mission house be an accessory building, allowing the services to be there, and still leave the holding symbol that if a hydro-G comes through favorable, that in the future a zoning amendment or lifting of the zoning holding symbol would be allowed to proceed with a 3rd dwelling. Now, I don't know if I'm out of line on that, but council is the ultimate decision maker. So having heard all the information, whether you want to amend the bylaw as such or to go back to having things checked out and coming back on May the 4th. Thank you.
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
I think, again, Silas just said something. I think the idea was 2 dwellings and the existing museum gallery service building. Whether that would go to residential, I think we're back in the issue with 3 dwellings, Mayor, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there has to be I guess we got to be clear up what this plan B would consist of.
But can I
Okay,
just,
yeah, Mr. Kelly, please.
so I think we are amenable to that change, that up to 2 dwelling units, let's say, and I think to use the wording, the conversion of the hall, the conversion of the church, and that all other uses, mission house museum, remain as is. I sense that should someone, us or some future owner of the lands, want to convert the Mission House Museum, should it fall into our ownership or a future owner of that land, would have to then seek a separate zoning recommendation or zoning amendment at a future time on its own, right? So we've now removed that 3rd building, even if you want to clarify that the Mission House Museum stays as an accessory building as community facility, right? Because we don't own it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
no, we just don't want to start the 90-day clock again. I think
No.
what we're doing is looking at saying to you, suggesting to you a bit of horse trading going on, and we're happy to suggest that your building stays as is, as a service accessory dwelling to the use or future use as residential buildings of the other 2 buildings on that property. With the holding symbol, of course, to go through the song and dance to get the hydro-G and the nitrate study, should it be required if we had a fixture or 2 into the church.
Okay. So what you're saying is, I just want to be very clear on this, that 2 residential buildings, I'm not saying which buildings, but 2 residential buildings would be allowed. But the second one, when it's developed, it would have to go through the hydro-G, because obviously if it's the church, it's going to mean there's a third septic and well. However, the other building you don't own is an accessory that it happens to be serviced. I think my challenge is I'm not looking at ending up with 3 residential buildings on this property, and we don't know how this is going to proceed. You don't know how long the mission house may or may not be there, whether the house will be there, whether the museum will be there. And this is very challenging for you. I get that, absolutely. You have a piece of property that somebody else's building's stuck on. And it's affecting, the fact that it's serviced with well and septic is affecting, is raising concern for council in moving forward with what you're trying to do. So if you would be amenable to saying that there would be 2 residential dwellings, when this should the second one, how do I say that? So that when the second one needs to be serviced to become a residential dwelling, would you do the Hydro-G study then? Because I'm asking that purely because if we look at the lay of the situation right now, that second residential building, if we look at current use, would be the church. And in order to add a third septic and well to the 1 acre, you really should do the Hydro-G. So the holding symbol would just hold off on that. Would that be acceptable?
Thank you, Mayor. So what you're suggesting is quite adequate, is that the bylaw would allow for the conversion of Mission Hall, or the hall, would allow for the conversion of the church, both to residential, and will keep Mission House Museum as an accessory building with its current use intact as a community facility.
And the conversion of the church.
Right. And the conversion of the church would be contingent on the Hydro-G and the nitrate study.
Okay. Would you be amenable to us not naming the buildings, but saying a first one residential building will be allowed without the Hydro-G.
Yeah.
A second would require a Hydro-G.
Yeah, up to you. It's just trying to
I'm just trying to leave this very flexible, and I'm leaving it flexible because I understand there are other factors that are not planning issues that still need clarification on, and we don't know where those are headed. So I'm trying to make sure this is as flexible as possible for you.
Much appreciated. No, that's
as
fine. Yeah.
Owners.
Mayor,
So
could I suggest too that if the Kellys could write a letter to the township with this request, so we were responding to a written request for a change, and here's the change they're looking for, so that any revised bylaw is consistent with what they're looking for, and that we understand what they're looking for.
Yes.
Can we ask that, please, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just urge them in their request to not identify specific buildings, but look at one use, an additional use in terms of the residential, and that leaves things open for your sake.
Okay. Yeah, I think
Mr. Cheeseman?
Yeah, I think though the way they've structured it is that it's very specific. The church and the hall and the building that they don't own will continue as a public use. So I think they were going to be specific in the buildings they wanted to convert. That was my understanding.
I understand that, but I don't know come June of 2022 I have no way of telling anyone come June of 2022 at this point whether that is true. So I don't want to put the Kellys in a position where they're constrained by identifying the buildings. That, I guess that's why I'm saying it. And I'm not, please, no one read anything into that statement other than I would like it to be very flexible from that perspective, because we don't know what the future of the building that is the Mission House Museum is going to be at this point in time. Mr. Kelly, are you understanding why I'm saying what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with the wording. I'll address Mr. Cheeseman's comment and more on a planning act. I think you're the professional on this one. Our submission of a change might indicate a change of application that may require other circulation of public notice. So I just need you to clarify that, as opposed to council who's implementing a change that they're satisfied with, which is their own bylaw, which does not create a notice of application change or otherwise for public notice. So I just want to clarify that point. I'm more Obviously, we're happy with the latter than the former, but I'll leave it to you as professionals to determine the outcome there.
God. The Planning Act can be a real monster. I know, before I answer it, if I do answer it directly, is that after a public meeting, a municipality can make changes to a bylaw, provided they pass a resolution under 3417 that they've made changes to the bylaw and determined that no further public notice is required.
Yes.
This one, though, there could be a more informal notice that if a proposal comes forward from Mr. and Mrs. Kelly for a revised, that the people who are a part of this application at least be advised that there has been a proposed change to the, well, there's another proposal, that there's going to be a meeting on X date to consider it. So at least they've been advised, everybody's been advised of a potential change without going through another application fee, another, 20 days, whatever. I consider the change part of this application. And just as long as we keep everybody, as we've talked about before, everybody in the loop, so everybody's getting the same information, the township council, township staff, council, and the public are all in the loop on this thing. So yes,
Okay.
a letter could suffice, Silas, if you're okay with that.
Mr. Lerbetsky.
Thank you, Mayor Love. I'm thinking that basically council has reviewed what the proposal was. If we pass, or pardon me, if council passes the bylaw today with the amendment that was suggested, it is the council decision to amend the bylaw now. Maybe it's not giving the Kellys the full package they applied for. It's an amended version, but everyone present here who did have opportunity to hear the discussion, and the Kellys were in agreement that yes, we will concede to a modification of the application based on what council wants to approve or not approve. That I don't think we would even have to go any further than the amendments that were suggested. The bylaw would receive maybe first and second reading. Mr. Cheeseman would redo the bylaw saying, no, it's not 3 residences, it's 2 residences now. We will put a holding symbol on, and a 3rd residence could be considered, providing all the studies have been completed to the liking of the municipality. Charles, do you think that would work?
I hate making these things in time like this. I wondered if, is there a way that we can just make sure we're going to follow proper procedure, and maybe I'm struggling with the best route to go. Yes. Because 3417 assumes no more notice, and yet we're going to give notice, but it's not an official notice, and we could get all caught up in procedure.
But we're just adjourning the meeting and,
okay.
and coming back to it. I think that's what we're looking to do, is to adjourn this meeting. The wording needs to be absolutely accurate, and the Kellys need to have an opportunity to word what it is that they're willing to accept, as opposed to what's on the table now. I really want them to have that opportunity to do that with the correct amount of time and thought, because we are asking that we would change the outcome slightly. So I think it's better if we adjourn this meeting. If we come back to this, we will just, it will be as if we took a 5-minute break and we came back, except it's going to be 2 weeks from now. And then we'll pull this together and hopefully be able to complete this. So we would just let everyone who has been in this meeting know that we're reconvening, and it is as if this meeting is continuing. I don't see how that would be challenging, because if council can sit here today and say, no, we can't quite accept what's in front of us, but we would change it to look like this, and that's acceptable, then I'm just asking that we allow for the wording to be carefully thought through, and the change to be something that is amenable to the property owners and works. I don't want to be rushed in trying to come up with some wording. Here we're struggling just to do a darn motion to, adjourn the meeting temporarily. So is that acceptable, that we adjourn with you bringing back to us that? Allowing the Kellys the time to write that letter to us, and for council members to provide them with questions that they have, and them to then be able to bring those answers to the reconvening of this meeting. Is that acceptable? Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Kelly, do you have any concerns with that? It is 2 weeks, but it is no more than 2 weeks before we're back in this meeting.
Well, the only thing that's outstanding
Is a letter, right?
this letter.
So that's the only thing I understand, that we understand that we need to submit a letter. I'm just looking at the public meeting package, and if I can just indulge Council for 13 seconds. Is the purpose and effect of the zoning amendments to rezone the property, blah, blah, blah. The exception zone would permit up to two single detached dwellings in the form of conversions of the 2 existing buildings on the subject lands, comprising of an assembly hall and church, right? I know that the mayor suggested otherwise, but maybe we can remove those wordings or something, but I would suggest to you to make it clear that those are the 2 that we're looking to convert. But
okay,
we can look at that wording and try to come up with different wording on the conversion thereof based on what we heard today.
But there's no other conditions
there's
that
no other
need to
condition.
be met within that time. There's no further letters coming in with responses required or otherwise.
so what we will do is we will provide you with the questions that council has, so that you have them
By the 29th.
by the 29th, and that then, if there's something you see in those questions that you feel you can answer, it will give you an opportunity to answer them when we reconvene the meeting. In the interim, we'll probably have some discussion about the Mission House septic system and get back to you on that. And if there is any way that you can seek some clarity about the driveway in terms of, is there a way to do that, it might be helpful. Just,
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other conversation.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
We've got ample room. Their tornado took most of the trees out in 2006 anyways. There's ample room to put driveways and parking in there anyway. But just accessing off of the road, we may just stick to the one entrance and do some different backyard driveways to access the other buildings, and just call it a day. But we'll have to determine that with maybe Hillary.
Yes. So can you have that conversation with him? And, you know, if you have some other way you think this could work, just if you could provide us with a sketch of that. I'm trying to gather all the information council needs to be comfortable to make a good decision for you as the owners and for the community, and to be able to get that done in 2 weeks to the best of our ability.
Understood. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay. So what kind of motion do I need then?
I think at this point, Mayor Love, you can just adjourn the meeting and reconvene on May 4th. And staff will draft what we're required, and we'll send a memo to council as to what date they need to have their information into Silas, and we'll circulate the questions to the Kellys.
Okay. Mr. Cheeseman, is it acceptable that I just adjourn the meeting at this point?
I'm not an expert on adjournments, but Sue, I guess you just feel we just adjourn the meeting, and I think Kelly's were going to come back with a revamped proposal, and council was going to send some questions to the applicant. Maybe the motion could mention some of those things potentially, but it's up to you folks.
Mr. Kelly.
Procedurally, I think Mr. Lerbetsky suggested that the current bylaw could receive first and second reading in the course of the regular meeting, and then third would come back as amended through the regular meeting. But again, I'll defer to your CAO and your planning officer, your planning manager as well, instead of just an adjournment.
Okay.
But your options are open to you as well, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so Mr. Lerbetsky.
Yes, after making that suggestion, Mr. Cheeseman corrected me. He said, you know, about any further notices. Well, we are making some modification to the application, which maybe the public wouldn't be aware of. I'm not sure if we're going in the right direction then, if further notice has to be given.
Okay, can I just suggest something? I was going to suggest it 20 minutes ago, that just so we don't get hung up on procedure, which is so often the case with the Planning Act, that the meeting be adjourned, but the council seek a legal opinion as to the proper approach for amending the application and ensuring proper notice and ensuring compliance with the Planning Act. It's going to take longer, but that will give people comfort that you're doing this, and that if we end up at LPAT, we don't get a challenge that you guys did not handle this the correct way. You want to, it makes so sense the way we proposed it, but that doesn't always convert into the way the law of the land, and I don't want to go off course on something unnecessarily if we can just get it sorted out by a lawyer. And I know that's an extra step, but I put it out there for a suggestion.
Well, we certainly could seek a legal opinion on that because we want to tick the boxes and not set this back, not cause a problem. So, Sue, could I have, I guess I need a motion that says that council seek a legal opinion on the requirement to give further notice? Would that be?
I'll go to motion 7.
I'm sorry.
So for consideration, whereas all council members were not present and whereas substantial concerns were expressed pertaining to the holding symbol, access and parking, the number of dwellings and requirements for Hydro G, that the meeting be adjourned and reconvened on May 4th, allowing staff time to obtain a legal opinion on notice.
Maybe that the meeting be adjourned and reconvened on May 4th, and staff seek a legal opinion on the requirement to provide further notice to the public. Does that capture it?
Yes, that's fine.
Mr. Larbetsky.
I think there just needs to be a little preamble before the notice part that there has been a request of the applicant to confirm things. So it would be based on that, that the whether further notice is required. Am I correct in that, Sue?
Sure, I can make it say.
I'm sorry, Sue, and I just, maybe I should check, are we recessing or are we adjourning? I love this technical stuff, isn't it great? Mr. Larbetsky.
I would say recessing, because once you adjourn, the meeting is over.
Okay, then let's not adjourn, we're recessing.
Did you want me to rewrite that, or
just change adjourn to recess?
Okay.
I'm sorry, and then maybe reread it.
Madam Mayor, do you mind if
Yes.
you just really just trying to get some clarification? So what we suggested was not necessarily a change of our application. What we suggest is we could live with an application change from the municipality's side of view, right? So all things being equal, then we will stick with our original application. What we're suggesting, we could live with the municipality if it changed it on us, right? Again, these are wording differences, right? But if this goes to an LPAT, I'd further suggest discussing the original application with LPAT than a suggested change. So we're happy if the municipality suggests changing that on us. We won't contest it, I'll say, but we are not suggesting making the change. We will live with your suggestion of the change being made.
Okay. So then I guess we would be I was just, I'm trying to work with you and I don't want to.
So that's what I think, because if and when these things go to LPAT, right? So we applied for one thing, right? And that's what we would argue at LPAT should that happen. But again, we are not asking for that change. We're suggesting we will live with that change if the municipality, if it makes you more comfortable, we are happy to live with that change, if inflicted, if you will, if you want to use that word, upon us by the municipality, right? And I think that's where Mr. Larbetsky was going originally.
So can I, if we do that, What I feel the instructions for not instructions, but direction is to prepare a revised bylaw. I would like the ability to share that with the proponent to understand. I understand what his plan B is. So I would like to do that. And then I'm going to read to you 3417 of the Planning Act, because now if there's not going to be a change to the application, it may simplify matters. Where a change is made in a proposed bylaw, after the holding of the public meeting, the council shall determine whether any further notice is to be given in respect of the proposed bylaw, and the determination of the council as to the giving of further notice is final and not subject to review in any court, irrespective of the extent of the change made in the proposed bylaw. So it's up to you, if you change a bylaw after a public meeting, whether you need to give notice. And it doesn't specify a 20-day notice, it just says any notice. And you can't be held liable in court for not giving anybody notice. I'm suggesting if we change the bylaw, you would have to pass a 3417 resolution. You may want to, though, advise the people that were connected to this, not only here on Zoom, but who've written in that, by the way, we're meeting on a certain date with a revised bylaw. So you can kind of, it's not a full-blown notice, but it's no notice. It's somewhere in between. It's providing some notice to the public. But it sounds like 3417, you're in control of the ship as far as what notice you want to give. So maybe we can, if we're comfortable with that, we can work on that basis.
Okay, I think that's actually an excellent solution, because we are not even at the number 10 draft copy of the bylaw yet in this meeting. So what you're indicating is that, Mr. Cheeseman, you'll work with the Kellys to come up with a revised bylaw. We will bring that back when we reconvene this meeting. And I think we're sort of in a holding pattern on number 9, questions discussion by council. So that will provide us, this is where we're recessing and where we will reconvene. When we reconvene at this point in this agenda, the questions that council submits to the Kellys, we will provide them with an opportunity to reply or respond to those to the best of their ability, recognizing it's 2 weeks away. Then we will have that revised draft bylaw, which you will work with the applicants to come up with, Mr. Cheeseman. I think that's our best path forward. It's just we literally we need more information, and we need a bit of time to just make these points clear, and then we can proceed. Is council okay with that? Are we good with that? So is there any concern about notice then? I think Mr. Cheeseman has hit the nail on the head. Sue, sorry.
So I see clarification as it pertains to when we go to the regular council meeting. Then are you still proposing to pass the first and second reading with amendment? Because then it would only receive first and second reading. It would come back then when all of your council is here at the same time. And at that point, you could choose to do the third or not.
See, I'm not thinking ahead to that meeting. I'm trying to figure out how to get us from this meeting into a recess and then back into this meeting in 2 weeks with what we need on the table to complete this meeting. Mr. Larbetsky.
With all due respect, I think because of the circumstances of the change, maybe we shouldn't be giving the bylaw first and second reading and just pull it from the meeting, and that the revised bylaw will be prepared by Mr. Cheeseman, and that no one will read into this change was incorrect to that. It's a completely one version bylaw that will be considered by council on May the 4th. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense to me. So we're not going to have a decision on this until May the 4th anyways. So the revised bylaw will come to council on May the 4th at the council and committee meeting in the regular council portion of the meeting, so it can be approved by council. So there is a time frame. We're meeting the Planning Act deadlines, and yes, I prefer to do that. I think that's just a matter that council can easily deal with in our council meeting coming up when we get to that. But if we're good, okay, so I guess we need a motion to recess. And now, does that motion need to identify all the various things that will occur between recess and reconvening? Yes, no? Can we recess? Or can it just be a motion to recess and subsequent to a motion where council has requested that the County of Renfrew redraft the proposed bylaw for the zoning bylaw amendment? I mean, is that sufficient, Charles? Based on direction?
It sounds, if I think that's what I'm being directed to do, that would be sufficient, I would think.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Sue, for the 12th time. I need a motion that council will request the County of Renfrew to redraft the zoning bylaw amendment in consultation with the applicants. Did that work, Mr. Cheeseman?
Yeah, and it could be that it redraft following discussion at this meeting and clarifications from the applicant or something like that. So it's
okay.
Clearly what I'm doing is based on an outgrowth of this meeting. And I'm not concocting this in my own mind. There was issues raised and I'm trying to address them. Sue, does that help you?
Yeah, I'm just waiting to make sure the conversation's over because I've redrafted 7 different and it referenced first and second reading. Now we're not. It referenced council questions. Okay. Are we still doing that? It referenced the applicant preparing a letter. So I just want to make sure I will wait till all comments are in, and I know that we're recessing. We're reconvening until May 4th. And let me know if I can move ahead and turn off the sound so I can try to draft something. I believe Mr. Kelly had his hand up. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry. I was trying to.
We're writing the same thing, Madam Mayor, and I'll ask you, and perhaps I just need to. We're just trying to get a wrap our head around timeline. So the application was deemed complete in February, I believe. Charles, I don't have the date in front of me right now. I've got only one screen working today. May the 4th is a council and committee meeting. I apologize. Your procedure would suggest that May the 4th is not a council meeting. It's a council and committee meeting. That would mean your final decision on that bylaw happens again on the 18th, or are all decisions on the 4th of May final?
Okay, so Mr. Kelly, we do standing committees within that agenda, but we complete standing committee and we do approve bylaws as council. So a portion of it's a little bit different from when you were our CAO. So the standing committee portion is standing committee, and then we do regular council business afterwards. So council would be council addressing and approving the bylaw on May 4th. It wouldn't have to go anywhere else.
Okay,
it would be completed.
I was just looking at time. All right, thank you very much.
Absolutely, no, I understand that completely, and we found this works best for us.
And just remember that 90 days, nothing happens on the 91st day unless the proponent or the applicant brings some kind of appeal forward. You know, it's.
No, I recognize that, but I think we are trying to get a timely decision here and to move this forward. I think this planning meeting is going to get the record for the most, the longest, certainly.
Can I just ask one more? Can we
yes.
ask one more question? So,
please, absolutely.
I just, again, clarification, and maybe just as much the public that's participating. So notice will go out to the 400 feet again. Is that what I'm understanding, or just those that have provided comments, and can they submit comments once again?
I would suggest at this point we are past public comment. I'm trying to follow this agenda. But they will be notified of the meeting so that they can watch. I don't know. I'm going to defer to Mr. Cheeseman. If we amend the bylaw, do we need to take further public comment?
Okay, as I just read you the Planning Act, it said no further notice. It's up to you whether you want to give notice. So you could choose not to, but if you want to keep people in the loop, but it doesn't say anything about whether you're going to accept any more comments. It's sort of silent on that. I don't have anything to offer. I think if you let people know what you're doing, and then whether you're going to meet to just, whether you're going to, I don't know what kind of meeting it will be. Is it it won't be a public meeting the next time you meet? This was the public meeting, or is this going to be a continuation, Silas, of the public meeting?
Continuation.
If it's recessed, it'll be a continuation.
Yes.
Yes.
And then the public, I presume, would be able to speak again. I see heads shaking, but we're doing stuff. I've been in this business a long time. I've never seen something like this unfold, but I'm mindful of the legislation, but I also want you guys to, you've got an interested public, how you want to deal with your public and be true to the process.
Okay. Again, I don't know. I much prefer, rather than going through delegation and speaking process, perhaps if there are written comments. But again, the public isn't going to know what the bylaw looks like until the agenda is produced for the May 4th meeting. So, I mean, in the end, we're at a point in this agenda where it is a council decision. It is council discussion. We've listened to the public. At this point, I don't really feel. I think the public can recognize we are looking for a solution within the parameters of planning.
Maybe the way to do this, and but you've had your public meeting, and you could close this and say, we've had the public meeting, and it's going to go back to council for a decision. Instead of recessing it, you've closed the meeting, and now you on May 4th you will deal with as a council for a council decision. That gets out of your more public delegation, but I don't know if that's is this public meeting over, Silas? I thought it was, maybe.
I think that is a very good suggestion, because council took into consideration everything that was submitted to this public meeting. I think you could perpetuate a public meeting forever and ever if you say, oh, well, we're going to make a little tweak at the next meeting. Do you do another public meeting? I think, as Mayor Love stated, we are past those points on the agenda, and that the bylaw is brought. We adjourn the meeting, and the bylaw is amended according to the direction that was given from this meeting.
I think you got to close the meeting.
That's
okay.
I don't know which.
You don't adjourn, you close the meeting.
Yeah.
I love planning.
I am procedural.
I know. I am perfectly prepared to close the meeting. Does any member of council have a concern with that? I think we need to end the public component and move forward. Oh, wait, I better check with Sue first.
I see Councillor Poplinski has his hand up, but prior to that, I just wanted to say that I did write the council direction if you wanted to have that on record prior to closing the meeting.
Okay, yeah, I'm not closing it yet. I'm just,
okay.
I'll go to Councillor Poplinski. And you're muted. Sorry, sir.
Yes, is that better?
Yes.
Thanks, Mayor Love. Yeah, I think if you're going to close the meeting, I think in all fairness, I think we should allow any of the people that are still with us that had questions. And I see Mr. Henstock is still there, and I think it would be only proper. There were some questions that he raised, and I believe there were answers that were coming back, and I'm not so sure they were fully explained. And I think he should be given the right to to clarify that?
Okay, so I'm gotta love this stuff. I'm going to go with, I think we need to recess the meeting because part of the component of what we've asked for is that council provide their questions to the Kellys and we give the Kellys an opportunity to answer them. I don't think it hurts to do that. I'm sorry, but I think that is reasonable. I don't know whether we need to do further public input, but certainly the public should hear council's questions and the answers that are provided. I think that completes this process. We are at number 9, questions discussion by council in following our agenda. So I would suggest that we need to, council has asked to do this, that you would submit questions that you have and the Kellys will have an opportunity to answer them. So we need to reconvene this meeting, have that happen. We will bring the newly redrafted bylaw to that reconvening of this meeting. And then council will be able to complete this planning meeting. I think I'd rather do it that way. I don't concur that we are at this point going backwards on a step on our agenda to seek further input. Certainly, members of council may have similar questions. And quite frankly, if we just let the individuals who have spent the morning with us know that the meeting is going to be reconvened on May 4th at whatever the time is that it will be reconvened at, we can complete this meeting and then move forward. I think that's a good compromise because I don't want to forget the step where council has asked to submit questions and I want to give the Kellys an opportunity to provide answers, which they have been more than gracious and willing to do. So I know we're looking for something simpler, but could we just recess this meeting and come back?
I just want to, Mayor, if I could just make a point, the Planning Act says where a public meeting is being held. So is this meeting is it stopping now?
It's just recessing.
Okay.
If we do that, am I violating the Planning Act in some way?
I don't know what the definition of is held, and I presumed it was held and you've closed it and you've then come out of a public meeting and then you go and make a decision. And under the act, you can, between the public meeting and the making a decision, you can change the bylaw and you can determine whether you need to give further notice. And if you don't give further notice, nobody can wrap your knuckles. You know, and an adjournment also means that it's not quite closed. So I think what you were suggesting is we seal off this meeting. We can involve, let Mr. Henstock know, you know, that we're meeting on the 4th and give him an opportunity to address council and leave it at that perhaps. He's the one that spent the time with us this morning. He'd be welcome back and then keep it that way. And we will have given some notice to the, of course, there's also the other folks too. Mm-hmm. They just came on. They should be notified as well.
Okay, but Mr. Cheeseman, are you suggesting that on the 4th we are, is it a planning meeting or is it just a part of the council meeting?
I think it becomes part of the council meeting. At a certain point, you've got to decide whether you want to cut off the public meeting. Is this it? If this is it, close this down and move on to the decision-making process. And maybe
if I was to include members of the public in the council meeting, they would have to be delegations. I'm not sure how I would do that. Is there some way I can do that, Mr. Lerbetsky, that you can think of? Where I could have the public speak to a bylaw before I approve it, or before council approves it, sorry?
I think that would fall, thank you, Mayor Love. I think that would fall under the procedural bylaw and only the CAO clerk can advise on that, whether someone can be a delegation at the passing of a bylaw. I think there may be a portion before where there is delegation, where there may be information that you could take before the actual passing of the bylaw, but you can't have a delegation just the time of enactment of the bylaw.
Well, and my concern with that is that it doesn't provide the Kellys with the opportunity, unless they are signed up as a delegation as well, to speak to anything that may be brought up by members of the public, and I don't think that's fair to the applicants. Just saying, trying to give them, trying to be fair to everybody here.
If that's the case, then maybe you could consider that there is more information to be heard. And that maybe the public meeting, then, if the mayor, if you feel that way, that you as council feel we need more information and you want to keep the lines of communication open to the public before you then step into the decision-making process. But I can't make that decision for you, and I don't have the Robert's Rules of Orders and all in your procedure bylaw. I don't know enough of it, so.
Okay, so I think honestly that's what we're saying. We would like to hear the further information, because I don't know what council's questions are going to be. Mr. and Mrs. Kelly's answers to council's questions are something that all of council will need to hear to complete this process. And sorry, I got dinged again, which sidetracked me. So I would like to reconvene the planning meeting. I know this isn't usually done, but I'd like to provide that opportunity for that to be completed and then close the meeting. Does council concur with that? Am I need somebody throw me a bone, gentlemen. Are we good with that? Do you want to reconvene? Do you want to recess and reconvene? Do you want to deal with this at the council meeting as delegations? I think that's a lot more tricky. But thoughts? Mr. Councillor Poplinski.
Yes, Mayor Love, I think, am I hooked up there?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I think the suggestion of recessing and reconvening on the 4th would be the wise decision. And that way it allows everybody to get the information that's we're looking for and have any questions at that time. So I would support that motion if it's a motion required.
Okay. Everybody moved on me. Other members of council, do you have any concerns with recess and reconvene? Not seeing any concerns. Mr. and Mrs. Kelly, do you have any concerns with recess and reconvene? It gets it done in the morning.
It's your meeting, Madam Mayor.
Sorry?
It is your meeting, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
We will oblige.
All right. I do appreciate that. It does get it done. You're not waiting through a council meeting or dealing with the delegation process. So we will make sure that everyone who is in the meeting right now is made aware that the meeting is reconvening on May 4th. We will provide you with the link and the time, the link that will have the day and time in it. And poor Sue is probably ready to throw something at us, but we'll see if she's come up with something that'll get us out of this. Mr. Larbetsky, sorry.
Sorry.
Just for clarity, the meeting starts at 9:30, and since this is a recess, it'll continue before the other two are brought forward to council.
Okay.
So, Madam Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
And you're welcome to change it.
Okay.
Whereas all council members are not present, whereas applicants have agreed to a revision, whereas clarification was requested of the applicant for parking and access for number of residential buildings, hydro-G requirements, and holding symbol. Therefore, council recesses this planning meeting and reconvenes on May 4th, at which time a revised bylaw will be brought forward by the County of Renfrew for council consideration, and provides council opportunity to submit their question to the Planning Development Licensing Manager by April 29th to be considered.
Okay, does anyone have a concern with that recommendation? Not seeing any concerns. Could I have someone move that recommendation?
Please.
Please. Moved by Councillor Poplinski. Could I get a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Bromwich. Any discussion by council? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that's okay, that's carried. So with that, I am going to say the meeting is recessed. I'm going to thank everyone. It's been a long morning. I think we have covered a great deal of ground, and we are headed towards what's going to be a good resolution. And I want to thank the Kellys for your patience and your endurance. It has been a long morning. Okay, everyone, thank you very much. Council, I don't think we're going to start our council meeting until 2 o'clock. I will confer with staff, but please, I don't want to see anybody back till 2. I'm getting dinged here again, sorry. Sue, are you good with that, 2 o'clock?